It's Query and Company.
I'm going to be keeping you company for the next few hours.
You are not going to believe the company.
This company.
You're going to bankrupt your mama's company?
At least I have the radio to keep me company. On 93.5 and 107.5. The Fan.
Okay, so a ton to get to today, which sounds odd for mid-June. But there's a ton to get to today. From college football as it relates to the Colts, to pro basketball as it relates to college, to the World Cup as it relates to the movie Hoosiers. I mean, we've got it all. We got a full slate. But let me begin by saying this on a Tuesday. Good morning to you. My name is Jake Query, Eddie Garrison, the other voice you hear on this program.
Good morning.
This is day number 2 of this show being, and I promise you we will not belabor this point every single day. But in terms of this program being on at 10 o'clock in the morning.
Maybe we should keep track of how many of these shows we get to before they decide to get rid of us, Jake.
Or, you know what would, how about how many shows we do in this new time slot before they actually send something out beyond just us mentioning it on the radio so that other day parts are aware of it, like promos, you know what I mean?
Oh, the other part that'd be fun is this: how many days it would take until you show up late?
Yeah, that's not bad. What I was going to ask you is here on day 2, are you used to it yet? I'm not. I mean, like when we were just running down, we were going over break times, and you're like, okay, first break is going to be at 12. 10. So are you? Yesterday, though, I will tell you this: as I was sitting by a pool at 1:30, I was like, okay, I'm used to this. Your thoughts?
Well, last week I got in the groove, as the kids say. I was getting up early. I was getting here as if the show was already at 10 last week. So this week, totally normal.
Okay.
Totally fine. A-okay.
I'm not used to getting up before noon anyway, but nonetheless, here we are on a Tuesday. Good afternoon, and let's begin with this. I want to talk about this situation that we mentioned last week with Brendan Sorsby, because I do think that it has a local tie-in 2 different areas. But let's begin with yesterday at the Fieldhouse, where tonight the Fever will be back in action. Are they at home tonight, by the way?
They are home tonight. 5 of 6 upcoming at home, yes. They're taking on the Toronto Tempo, not to be confused with the Toronto Tempo.
Excuse me?
You don't say the second T in Toronto. It's Toronto.
Yeah, it's T-Dot, as they say up there.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
T-Ron?
Caitlin Clark, by the way, is probable with the back injury, and Raven Johnson is now questionable after rolling her ankle yesterday in practice. Stephanie White has no voice. That much we know about the Fever. But yesterday at the Fieldhouse, you had the workouts for the Pacers. Even though they do not have a first-round pick, you are always, it wasn't raining when Noah built the ark. So you are always preparing for every possible scenario. Of course, that doesn't mean that they will not be involved in the draft. They just don't have that pick that initially, it was supposed to be that DeBonsa and Peterson and Boozer and Wilson were all coming in for workouts, but I don't want to have to go over that again. But I think back to this as it relates to the Pacers. And I think about when I was in college. Now, why I was in college has really a hill of beans to do with the Pacers or college basketball today, when I was in college, I should say, except for this. I think I've mentioned before, because of the high school that I attended, because a large percentage of my community growing up all attended IU. By the time I got to IU, because I was a transfer in, most people had already kind of established if they were in Greek life or they had their set group of friends or whatever else. And I already had this large social circle down there because so many people I grew up with went to IU. So I didn't feel really the need to get involved in that aspect of it because everybody else was kind of already developing in that area. They'd already had their fraternity, their sorority, their off-campus housing, whatever it might be. So I lived with a buddy of mine that also was a transfer into IU, and we lived off campus in an apartment, and that's where I lived next door to, and then eventually made it one big apartment. It was like Kramer and Seinfeld on Seinfeld. Back and forth between myself and the neighbors, which happened to be completely potluck level, but it happened to be Pat Knight and his roommate, Ryan Carr. And Ryan Carr, who is now, of course, with the Pacers with IU and was longtime director of scouting for the Pacers. But Ryan Carr and I would sit on Friday or Saturday nights when the rest of the world was kind of in their social element. A lot of my college days were spent with Ryan, who was a student manager for the Indiana basketball team and is now, of course, the general manager for Indiana University basketball after his long stint with the Pacers. And Ryan and I would sit and just watch college basketball games and talk about college basketball a ton. And obviously, at that time, it was beyond my wildest imagination that Ryan, and his as well, would be the guy that was helping piece together and place together Indiana University basketball. But as we have become adults, and in Ryan's case, far more accomplished and mature than myself, one of the things that I saw when Ryan was working with the Pacers was how often he would go and watch different college basketball programs and the relationships that he developed with different college basketball programs. And among those, truthfully, was Purdue and Matt Painter. And Ryan had very good working relationships with Tom Crean. I mean, I'm not just saying it was isolated to Purdue, but there absolutely was and still is a reciprocal respect between Ryan and the Purdue basketball program. And certainly Ryan and Matt Painter. Matt Painter, who, by the way, in this twisted game of weird, odd connections as they intertwine over the course of time, culminating in the point that I'm going to make, Matt Painter grew up an Indiana basketball fan. Matt Painter grew up rooting for Indiana, but when Matt Painter and Todd Leary were on an AAU tournament together as seniors in high school, when the news dropped that Jay Edwards was leaving the Indiana basketball program, and Matt Painter, who was set to commit to Purdue, and Todd Leary, who was set to commit to Minnesota, looked at each other and said, one of the two of us may well get this scholarship offer, and both of us probably would take it. And the offer went to Leary. So Leary went to Indiana, Painter went to Purdue, and you know the Purdue connection now with Matt Painter. And so Matt Painter, I think, in many ways was running a basketball program that Ryan Carr could appreciate and respect because he saw a lot of the Bob Knight program that he grew up around because of Matt Painter's affinity for Bob Knight. I don't mean necessarily in form of, running the motion offense and man-to-man defense only and whatever else, but just in the fact of Painter's demand of discipline for his players and the stability that his program provides. I think that for Ryan, that was something that he had a great admiration for. So you had in Ryan Carr now, who is in charge of rebuilding the Indiana basketball program, and an odd twist, part of what he probably will lean on is what he has witnessed in the way Matt Painter has built Purdue. And Matt Painter building Purdue in an odd twist, partially on what he had admired about Indiana. The point being, you can find inspiration within your rival. You can find blueprint in the place that you least expect it because it's the team that, in an odd way, you find yourself rooting against, but at the same time rooting for because of connection and blueprint and roadmap. And I think some of that we see yesterday at the Fieldhouse because Braden Smith was trying out for the Pacers, maybe he had a workout with the Pacers along with Trey Kaufman-Renn, amongst other players. And here is a guy in Braden Smith that grew up as a Pacer fan, grew up in Westfield, watched a ton of Pacer games. I'm sure, like most of us, Braden Smith a year ago was locked in and loaded and captivated by the Pacers playoff run, and probably up in West Lafayette was having viewing parties, or in Westfield or wherever, to watch to see whether or not the Pacers could get it done and bring home an NBA title. And Braden Smith's watching all of that, and as he's watching it, he is hoping and watching and clamoring on the Pacers' ability to shut down New York and limit Karl Anthony Towns and contain Jalen Brunson. And yet, and then, like most Pacer fans, as Braden Smith grew up one, you then have to sit and watch after the disappointment of a year ago and see the New York Knicks win the NBA title, a title that many believe a year ago should have been Indiana, and this year, without that injury, could have still been Indiana. And it gives you hope and inspiration within your rival if you're a Pacer fan, because you look at the Knicks and you say, if they can do it, there's no reason Indiana can't. Which takes us back to Braden Smith. Here is a player, and eventually we're all going to figure this out. Eventually we are all going to learn from our own error. Eventually, we are all going to say, at some point, we have to quit overthinking it. Quit overthinking it. When players become prospects at the NBA level, more often than not, we look at it and we try to find reasons why they will fail in the NBA, reasons why they will fail in the NFL. Reasons why they will fail in Major League Baseball. It's not unlike what Ted Kennedy eulogized of his brother, Bobby Kennedy. Some men see things as they are and say, why? I dream things that never were and say, why not? And when it comes to prospects, sometimes we look at it and we're so transfixed on the why not that we lose sight of the why. So for Braden Smith, who is undersized, he's too small to succeed in the NBA. He doesn't have the burst to be able to play at the next level. He's not going to be able to get his shot off at the next level. These are all things that were said about Jalen Brunson. And odd as it may be, not unlike those examples I cited beforehand, odd as it may be, Braden Smith may be finding inspiration in the guy that is the rival. Just as Ryan Carr might be to an extent about a program that he watched in practice and probably grew an admiration for, wait for it, Braden Smith. It's an interweaving web in the world of sport. But we can learn oftentimes from precedent and from example. And in the case of Braden Smith, you have to wonder, as he's getting ready to go through this process of trying out for NBA teams, how much of inspiration and promise does he get from the example of Jalen Brunson? And is he a fan of Jalen Brunson, even though I assume he's a fan of the Pacers? He talked about both yesterday.
I don't think it made me think differently, but it definitely gave people our size. I know he's a little bit taller than me. I'm probably a little shorter than that. But, but people of that size, like hope and a chance that it is possible, it is doable. And obviously I have enough confidence in myself in my game and my ability to go out and perform and play and be special like that. Obviously don't know when and where, but at the end of the day, like it gives a lot of people hope. And especially that run they had, like with TJ and Nembhard, like it was good to see that. It gave people let's see smaller guards, like more of an opportunity and hope with that.
TJ McConnell, another great example. You can find inspiration there. Not a rival, but a player on his team. McConnell, a little bit bigger than Braden Smith. But we'll talk to Nathan Baird coming up, who has covered Purdue, about where exactly Braden Smith falls in terms of the draft. Falls, I don't mean like falls, but where he slots in terms of the draft. Because at some point, this is a loaded draft, there's no doubt. But once you get to the point of getting past the can't miss prospects, then it becomes, okay, if there's a player that truly intrigues you, and if there's a player that you really feel like is a diamond in the rough, or a player that, yes, there might be some demerit, he's too short, he's a step too slow, any of those things. If there's a player like that, you weigh out, you get to a point in the draft where you are weighing out, okay, if I take a flyer on this and it doesn't hit, how big is the piece that I'm missing out on? If you're drafting 28th, and there are still, in this draft, let's say, 35 players that are can't miss, they are surely going to be eventual starters in the NBA, then you probably don't take a flyer at 28 because you're still within the range of that. But if you're at 38 and you're like, okay, now we're into the mix of, if I take this player and it busts, what am I missing out on? Because that's what I always say about the draft. When you look at the NBA draft or the NFL draft, and people say all the time, boy, they really swung and missed on that guy. What a terrible pick. What an awful selection. And then you say, okay, but who was available? And you look at it, well, I'd never heard of these other 5 guys that are right after that. Okay, so is it really a swing and a miss? Because what were you missing out on? It becomes the question, right? And I do think that with Braden Smith, I think there are a lot of people, and yes, I think that Brunson does come into play because there are going to be franchises that look at it and say, okay, when we have this player, if we feel that there is something there and we're willing to take a flyer on that, what are we passing on? What are we passing on? I think there are a lot of teams that are going to look at what Jalen Brunson notably just did and say, this guy won at every level. He won in high school. He won in college. Now, Braden Smith didn't win a national title at Purdue. I get it. He's the all-time assist leader in college basketball history. And not only that, he made gritty scoring plays when Purdue needed them. He is not the scorer that Jalen Brunson is, but is he the distributor and court visionary? Quite possibly. Now, weighing out what a player brings to you versus the demerit or the potential bust of it takes us to the other big storyline, and it's the biggest of the day. Eddie, we talked last week about Texas Tech, and I talked on Friday about this situation with Brennan Sorsby, and for those that are unfamiliar, I can't imagine you're not, but for those that are unfamiliar, Sorsby is a quarterback that began his career at Indiana, transferred from Indiana to Cincinnati, then became the most coveted quarterback transfer in the portal this year. He was the biggest free agent quarterback out there. And Texas Tech, if you watch Landman, you know. Billy Bob Thornton's character in Landman, they're pumping oil all over the place, and the money is flowing in like the River Thames. And his son, throughout Landman, is wearing a Texas Tech hat. A lot of oil money out there. Go Red Raiders. And Texas Tech last year had an elite-level defense that carried them into the college football playoff. Texas Tech, which is not Indiana level of the depth of college football obscurity, but the Minnesota of the Wild West. Okay program, okay athletic department. Biggest splash they've had athletically in 40 years is they hired Bob Knight, right? So Texas Tech, and obviously then they had Chris Beard, and they went to the Final Four, but I'm just saying. Texas Tech, with all of this oil money and all of this booster money in the NIL era, is like, we are going to build a power football program and a power team. They've had great teams. They've had exciting, high-flying offenses. Mike Leach brought in that offense, but you get my point. And Sorsby was the prize this year that was going to put him over the top. And then after they acquire him, sign him in free agency, the word comes out. The NCAA is banning former Cincinnati quarterback Brendan Sorsby for gambling on apps up to $90,000 and thousands of bets, including back to when he began his career at Indiana and betting on Indiana while playing for Indiana. More on that later. But he then gets in the crosshairs where people are like, this guy can't be eligible. And Texas Tech says, no, he can be eligible. We'll take it to a court. A judge rules, you know what? Let him play. Let him play. This is like the bad news bears at the Astrodome. Let them play. Let them play.
Let them play.
Yes, and Tanner's running around, and he's chanting it, and everybody's going crazy in the Astrodome. And that's what's happening in Lubbock, Texas, about Brendan Sorsby. Let him play.
Got their picket fences and everything.
Correct. Let him play. And then everybody's saying Texas Tech is selling their soul to the devil. They don't even believe in morality because it's going to deny them the chance to be the best team they can be. And finally, the ultimate resolution of it all, Brendan Sorsby declares he's going into the NFL supplemental draft. Texas Tech is able to say, woo, avoided that because we weren't going to have to deal with the PR nightmare of having this guy on the floor. And the NFL, he's now the NFL's problem. I'm not saying he's a problem. He may be the nicest kid in the world, and he has an addiction that he has sought therapy for. But many addictions, part of the recovery is obviously relapse. I'm not saying he's going to do that. I don't know. But it does come with a risk for any team.
Have you seen some of the latest reporting from Pete Thamel on the Sorsby situation, Jake, of ESPN?
In regards to since his name got into the supplemental draft?
Yes, the number of bets and the amount of money he's wagered.
Okay. Proceed.
Over 9,000 total bets were made.
Okay.
And totaling at least $90,000.
I did know 90,000. I mean, that's what we know about, right?
On professional and college sports over 4 years at Indiana, Cincinnati, and Texas Tech.
That's what we know about.
Yes.
Now, I have had several people ask me this. I don't know the answer to this, but I'm going to tell you what I think. Several people have asked me, Jake, this is a player that many believe, had he not had any issue whatsoever, that athletically speaking, he would have been a first, second, or third round pick. This is a player with athleticism that can improvise. Is this a player that the Colts would take a chance on? Are they going to outthink everybody else and take a flyer on Brendan Sorsby? It's a supplemental draft pick. Why not? Was the question that people had. Is he going to be a guy that they say, this is intriguing enough, let's give it a shot? And my answer for you on that is this. As I mentioned earlier, I think a lot of times things are based on precedent. What a tangled web we weave. The name that most often comes up when you talk about Brendan Sorsby is not John Williams, is not, there are other players, Pete Rose. There are other players that have been involved in gambling scandals, obviously. It's not Boston College that people bring up. It's not Tulane as an institution that people bring up. The name that I hear, because it's football and it's the quarterback position, is Art Schlichter. Art Schlichter, who was a guy that had all the talent in the world. Art Schlichter, a guy that was promising, was a top 10 pick in the NFL draft, a first rounder, selected by the Baltimore Colts. And Art Schlichter, who has relapsed more times than you can count. I'm not making light of it, but he has made a living and a career off of continuing to fumble second and 20-second and 30-second chances. And the initial franchise that Art Schlichter burnt was the Colts. That was 40 years ago. But there are still people within the organization in very prominent situations and positions. And yes, I realize that Jim Irsay, rest his soul, is no longer with us. And Jim Irsay is somebody that would absolutely be in favor of second chances. And kudos to him for that and that kindness within his heart. But there are enough people, in my opinion, within positions of power still within the Colts organization that would have been around for the Art Schlichter era that they would say, we're not going near it. And I'm not saying Brendan Sorsby's Art Schlichter. I'm not. Art Schlichter's a whole other level. But I do believe that, again, precedent and what a tangled web we weave. And I think in that case, going back, there are people still close enough to it that they'd say, no thanks. Now, as for the Braden Smith situation, and could he be a guy that I don't think at this point first-round pick, because not because of him, because it's a loaded draft, but where does he slot? And what about Trey Kaufman-Wren? What about Trey Kaufman-Wren and where he and his workouts and some of the things that he's looking to get into? A guy that covers Purdue, Nathan Baird, going to join us other side to talk about it. Stephen Holder on the program today as well, Scott Agnes. And did we see Hoosiers in the World Cup? I'll explain as we proceed. Tuesday edition here, Query and Company on the Fan. Hey, there's Jake Query. You know what? Brand new year. Yesterday, I was at the pool. Bathing suit season, guys. And what does that mean? It means it's time. It's time to get back in shape and recapture the old you. And Game Day Men's Health wants to help you do exactly that. I love Game Day Men's Health with their locations in Avon, Carmel, Fishers, and Greenwood. GameDayMen'sHealth.com is the website. What exactly is it? Well, I'm telling you what it is, guys. It's time to get back and get back in the game. Maybe it is testosterone therapy that you could use, testosterone replacement therapy, to just get that extra energy going, help out with that totally stubborn belly fat or visceral fat on you. Perhaps you just say, you know what, Jake, I was working out, but I just get so sore and it takes too long for recovery. Peptide therapies could be there for you. And now those can be done orally without injection, just oral peptide therapies, which is a huge bonus from Game Day Men's Health. Weight loss injections as well. All those things, guys, to help you avoid that feeling of a midday nap, to help you get back in the game and make it easier to feel your youth again. GameDayMen'sHealth.com is the website where you can set up for a free consultation to look over everything they have and find the therapy that is best for you. Again, Avon, Carmel, Fishers, and Greenwood. Super relaxed sports-themed type clinics, in and out in an hour, and they are fabulous folks. GameDayMen'sHealth.com. That's GameDayMen'sHealth.com.
It's Query and Company on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
Maybe, just maybe, if I'm bringing up Art Schlichter as it relates to Brennan Sorsby, maybe I'm being petty, but I don't think so. Yes, it is true the Colts have taken flyers on players to offer a second chance, but oftentimes that's where it's like, hey, this would be something maybe that could really pay off in the long run because it's a position of need. I don't know at this point that quarterback experiment is a position of need. The Colts have plenty of that. They have plenty of that. Did you like, by the way, I didn't even think of this, Eddie. This is sometimes the subtle brilliance that just comes by happenstance serendipitously on this program, okay? Do you notice my shirt today?
It's a black and gold shirt, yeah.
The colors of what school?
Let's see. Vanderbilt?
Within the state.
Valparaiso?
This is obviously Purdue colors and Purdue script for that matter. And yet, what does it say?
The Golden Hoosier.
So it interweaves Purdue and Indiana, right? The Golden Hoosier, which is why I bought it, because I thought it was funny. I was in St. Louis. It's a restaurant in St. Louis. But we were talking about Purdue, and as it relates now to, could there be a couple of guys that could wear Indiana on their chest in terms of their next stop? Braden Smith, Trey Kaufman-Renn, both yesterday working out for the Pacers, joining us now in the program to talk about that. He is the Purdue writer from the Indianapolis Star, Nathan Baird, joining us. Nathan, how are you?
I'm doing great. How's it going?
No complaints at all. Listen, it's for you. It's, I guess, busy because you're watching both of these guys in terms of Kaufman-Renn and Braden Smith and their workouts. I'll begin by asking this: to your knowledge of those two players, is there one more than the other that has had more stops here on this NBA tour, or is it pretty even in terms of where it would appear the interest level is for them at the next level?
It's close. Trey Kaufman-Renn said that yesterday with the Pacers was his 8th. Braden Smith said it was his 4th, but he has 2 scheduled for this week. He's in Los Angeles today with the Lakers. He'll be in Denver on Thursday. That kind of made sense to me, though. I mean, Braden Smith, 4 years of starting, and I think that people know exactly what he is relative to what he would be in the NBA. For Trey Kaufman-Renn, obviously a very productive player at the college level. Where he fits in the NBA is maybe a little bit more tenuous, so I understand people wanting to bring him in to see if he can show them the things that he wasn't able to show at Purdue.
Do you think it's possible, Nathan, that scouts will look at, or that if you analyze the two of them, let me give you a hypothesis and you can grade said hypothesis, okay? It would seem as though there may be the narrative that Braden Smith as a college player maxed everything out of what he has because he's a smaller player, he's undersized, and therefore there's the question of whether or not that translates into the NBA and he can continue to, if you will, play above his level. And then with a Trey Kaufman-Renn, I think there may be some intrigue by NBA teams of, was he a system player that system, which was the right way to use him at Purdue, don't get me wrong, but that there might be more to Kaufman-Renn that can be squeezed out of it, whereas Braden Smith, you have a better idea of how much juice was in there. Does that hypothesis make sense?
A little bit. I would say that with Kaufman-Renn, I think the bigger question is just what is he at the NBA level? He obviously played 4 and 5 for Purdue, depending on what they needed the most on a given night or a given season. But how his skill set, how will that translate to the NBA? He wasn't a guy who really did any perimeter shooting at Purdue. He wasn't a guy who was asked, or when he was asked, it wasn't necessarily his comfort zone to try to defend, more skilled, quicker guys out on the perimeter. Those are both things that are going to be mandatory in the NBA for someone of his size, someone that's in that 6'9" range. He's probably not a center, even maybe an undersized center in the NBA. Needs to show more of the skills that you'd want from an NBA 4. With Braden Smith, there's obviously size questions that came up a lot yesterday. It's apparently been coming up at every stop he makes. But again, he is what he is. I mean, he has been a capital P, capital G point guard, and he's done it as well as anybody in college basketball history, you could argue, has done it. And it's just a matter of, how big of a role that will lead to in the NBA. With Trey Conferman, I think it's a bigger question of just does he fit in the NBA? I mean, does he get a shot on like a two-way contract where he can do some G League time? He's obviously, though, acquitted himself very well in the pre-draft process, earning a combine invite out of the G League combine and impress the right people. He's built some momentum there. So it looks like there's a good chance some NBA team is going to take a good look at him. I think it's just still, he's in the process of proving that he is an NBA fit.
Nathan Baird, my guest, Indianapolis Star, Purdue beat writer. All right, Nathan, let's begin with this on the Smith side. I'm always interested with this through the combines and the workouts themselves. The true measurement of a player, and by that I mean literally their physical stats. He, by all account, Braden Smith is, because, it's funny, you look at a program and you're like, really, this guy ain't 6'5". You know what I mean? This guy, like, if I played in the NBA, they'd list me at 6'6". I'm 6'4", right? I'm 6'3" and 3/8. So that, or 7/8. That said, Braden Smith is, for the most part, showing up as what in terms of his size?
He was a little under 5'11" without shoes at the combine.
Okay, I would think, and that, again, I'm going to fall into the narrative here. That right there appears to be in that magic period where, yes, Muggsy Bogues and Spud Webb would be the exception, but there's not a lot of precedent there, right? In terms of
right.
That would 6 foot you can get away with. Can you get away with it at that height?
I think it's a question that he's been facing everywhere. And there's only a handful of guys in the NBA last season who were even like relatively that size, that height, that weight that he has. I think he's in like 165-ish, somewhere around in there. At least that's what he's been listed at. And I think the question you have to ask yourself is, yes, there's very few guys in the NBA of that profile like that end up sticking and having careers. But with his talent, is he one of those guys that's going to be the exception to the rule? I remember looking at this to some extent back with Carson Edwards when he was coming out in whatever years that was, 2017, 2018, I think after the 2018 season, or 19. He was, not a guy with not a lot of size. And you looked at what guys who were probably going to be second round picks had really like stuck around in the NBA for a long time. And there were very few like that. But he was a player who it was so dependent on him being able to make a high volume of shots to be able to stick because of his size and the fact that he wasn't really going to run the point. He was probably going to be a 2 a lot of the time. Could he defend that position, et cetera? With Braden Smith, again, he is a legitimate, true point guard. And, if this was the NFL and it was like an offensive lineman who was 320, had played at 320, and all of a sudden he showed up at the combine at 350, people would be like, wait, what's going on? Some kind of a crazy change in their size. Braden Smith didn't shrink. He's been this size the whole time relative to whatever level of basketball he was at. And yet he still thrived. He was still able to, be someone who could attack the basket, be someone who could score in the mid-range. Defensively, he wasn't asked to be the primary guy defending the one from the way Matt Painter does it. Usually has someone else. Last year it was, CJ Cox, Sha'Carri Harris come up and jam the other point guard. But Braden Smith also is a guy who could get a lot of steals. Like he's plays a lot of energy, plays aggressively. I think those are things that can translate well for him, regardless of size, to the NBA. It is going to still be a challenge, though. He's going to be, opponents would, one of the ways that you would try to take him out was you would either hard hedge him with big men or you would just put a bigger defender on him. And that was something that teams did occasionally, almost strategically gimmicky kind of way. It's what he's going to see every time down the floor in the NBA, just because everybody is naturally that size.
When you look, Nathan Baird, Indianapolis Star, my guest here, when you look at Trey Kaufman-Renn and you talk about the fact that with each step of this, he seems to impress a little more or get a little bit more leash here in terms of his NBA perspective nature of fit. What has he done well from what you understand from the time that he was done playing as a Boilermaker? What has he done well that has raised eyebrows?
Well, something about Trey that I always thought was really intriguing was, and I've only covered him the last 2 seasons, but going back to that, the first of those 2 seasons, he would talk about himself as, well, I'm the most physical player in the country. And that's something that you then have to live up to, and something that other teams are going to, opponents are going to say, oh, yeah, well, how about this? And they're going to come in and try to, disprove your theory a little bit. And I think that is something that is probably translated very well into these workouts, because now it just, everything ratchets up a level. These are grown men you're going to be facing. You've got to be able to, especially if you're 6'9" in a world where 6'11" and 7 foot is more the norm. He obviously, though, played with a lot of those guys in at Purdue too, whether it was Zach Edey, whether it's the guys they have now. He became the player he is going through those guys, working out against those guys. So I think some of it is just that physicality that he played with, the way he translated that into the kind of a breakthrough year as a rebounder last year, had proved himself as a rebounder. I think that has shown up in these workouts too. The other thing about him, though, is when he starts talking to teams, you're not going to have any character questions about Trey Coffin-Renn. You're not going to have any basketball IQ questions about Trey
Super
Coffin-Renn.
intellectual dude,
Just,
right? I mean,
exactly,
really,
yeah.
Impressive.
Yeah, very analytical,
yep.
But also just someone who just seems to be very focused and wired the right way from a professional standpoint. Someone who is going to not let distractions get in his way. Someone who is going to take this seriously, and I think just has the right perspective on the world and on his place in the basketball world. So he was definitely someone that I thought once he got into visiting with teams, they would see the intangibles that he has. And that isn't the most important thing in this process. You still got a ball. But I thought if there was going to be a tiebreaker, that was going to help him.
Okay, lastly, before we let you go, Nathan Baird, my guest, talking Purdue athletics from the Indianapolis Star. Because it is that time of year where you're coming off a spring ball and et cetera, and they have been so off radar, but again, new administration, including eventually new athletic director with Mike Babinski leaving. But from a Purdue football standpoint, we look for this fall. Is there any sign that, in fact, there's going to be a step forward?
Well, not to cop out, it's always going to depend on what you consider a step forward. As someone who watched each of the last 2 seasons, I would consider last season a step forward, even though it was only one more win and they still didn't win a Big Ten game. They were a more competitive team.
I would agree with that. Yeah, they were in games, right?
Exactly. But I also think that the what you're measuring changes this season. That was kind of the 1 year that you get to kind of get your feet under you. Going into this next season, it becomes, did you make a bowl game or not? Because that is what every team in the Big Ten is judged by, really. I mean, this is power conference football. Did you get into one of the 60 bowl games that there are now or not? And yes, there's been a lot of roster turnover. All those things that you could say about Purdue, you could say the exact same thing about a lot of other teams in college football. And I don't expect them to compete at the top of the Big Ten this next season. But whereas last season, it was really more about getting their feet under them again, course correcting, giving themselves a foundation to build off of going forward. Whether they did that or not, now it's about, did you win enough games to get into the postseason? Are you building winning momentum? It can't just be competitive momentum. Are you building winning momentum? I think there's reason to believe that they picked up some guys through the transfer portal this past year that are intriguing, some junior college guys that are intriguing. But they've still got to get a lot better in a lot of important ways. So they're going to find real playmakers. Is Ryan Brown going to play with consistency? Are they going to protect Ryan Brown? It's not that easy of a schedule still this coming year. So again, I think last year was a step forward, but I think if they were to repeat that this year, that would not be progress. There has to be wins. There has to be more wins. I don't know if you have to get all the way to 6 to say that you have moved forward, but you've got to have more than 2. You've got to start winning Big Ten games again.
All of it will be covered, Indianapolis Star, by Nathan Baird, who joins me now. Nathan, I'll let you get back to finding out where exactly Trey Coffin-Renn and Braden Smith, the next workouts, and where they may end up in the draft, and then we'll get into football season and have you back on as well. But certainly appreciate the perspectives today.
Anytime. Thanks a lot.
Nathan Baird joining us from the Indianapolis Star. We come back. We love in this town a good Cinderella story. We love a good underdog story. I mean, we went through 7 straight years of the Pacers wearing Hickory jerseys. Not literally, but probably longer than they should have worn them. It was cool at first, and then after a while, you're like, really? We're still doing this? But, I mean, seemingly every other week, there's some anniversary of the Milan Miracle or the movie Hoosiers or anything along those lines. And did we actually see it on the world's biggest stage? I'll do a deeper dive on it next. Hey there, Jake Query. I mentioned yesterday for the first time, went to the new pool that I joined, and I thought, I wonder if these are my peeps here. And sure enough, I saw a guy drinking a Surfside, and I said, that guy right there, in fact, is with the program. Surfside is the very best for that situation or anything, no matter what the occasion. Iced tea with a splash of vodka, lemonade with a splash of vodka. The blueberry lemonade is perfect for this time of year. The straight lemonade is fabulous as well, and the iced tea. I love the raspberry tea with that splash of vodka. Surfside, just 100 calories, no carbonation, so oh so smooth and easy to enjoy. Look for it wherever you buy your favorite adult beverages. Please be 21 when consuming the can with the sunset stripes, and please consume responsibly.
This is Query and Company on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
Eddie, we're going to do this in the form of an analogy, okay? And I will allow you to pick. We're going to go actually. What are we doing here? We had this great World Cup song, and now we're going into this fish crap of the guy with the vacuum cleaner. Is that right?
Well, you said analogy, so I just had to prepare the listeners, warn them. Remember, bad analogy sounder. We may have new listeners from 10 to 1, Jake. So,
do you want to go with the NCAA tournament or Indiana high school basketball history? Which would you like to go with here?
Well, both of them are local since the NCAA Hall of Champions, one of the most underrated places, according to whatever that Facebook post you saw was last week.
Overrated.
That's what I said. Overrated.
You said under.
I said over.
No, you said under, but it's listed as over.
Okay. Anyway, nonetheless, let's go with option 2.
Option 2, that would be the high school tournament?
Yes.
Okay. Let me give you, in terms of World Cup, matter of fact, right now, I will allow you, the listeners, to participate in this fabulous analogy game. And you can do so by sending me immediately your first answer. You can do so. Should we do it via the station text or my cell phone text, Eddie?
Let's do it station. That
Okay.
way I can monitor at the same time.
Perfect. 239-1070. Please wait until I'm done before submitting your answer. I want you to tell me, in the World Cup, there have been 22 World Cup tournaments. We're looking for the Indiana high school basketball program that is the equivalent of this. A team that has qualified for 16 of the 22 World Cup tournaments. So on the world soccer stage, probably top 8 to 10 all time. And has won a World Cup. Just one, but they've won one. And they've been in the mix more often than not. So I would like to know, someone send me, please, Eddie, and you tell me the first answer that comes to mind, or the first answer that pops through at 239-1070, somebody can submit. I would like to know what Indiana high school, from a basketball standpoint, is a perennial traditional power that has been a player within the Indiana high school basketball tournament for the majority of its existence, and has even won a state title and is around more often than it's not, and is in the Sweet 16, let's say, on a regular basis.
So on the soccer front, we've got Germany and England. Those were the first two.
No.
Italy.
No. I'm looking, I don't care about soccer. I'm looking for, based on what I just said, the team that I'm talking about has been to 16 of 22 tournaments. They have won a World Cup. That would be the equivalent of what Indiana high school basketball program? Has anybody submitted an example in Indiana high school basketball?
We do have somebody now with an Indiana high school. I think they got confused because you were the way that you were, describing that. Muncie Central, North Central, Brownstown Central, Lawrence North.
Okay. Muncie Central has won more state championships than anybody in Indiana high school basketball. They won 8 in 88, so that would be off the board. I'll just say this. I'll go with, and I don't know how many this school has won, but I'll go with
Ben Davis, another Lawrence North, Carmel.
Lawrence North's won a ton, though. I'll go with Jeffersonville. Jeffersonville's won, I think, 2 state titles. I could be wrong. Maybe they won some back in the day, but or Richmond, one of those like big schools, traditional schools that every year when you talk about it, like Muncie Central is Brazil, okay? And, for that matter, Lawrence North would be like Argentina because they've had great. So I'm just going to go Jeffersonville. Big school. The team that I just mentioned is Spain. Spain has been to 16 of the 22 World Cups. They won the World Cup back in 2010. They are a perennial power. And it is not unusual to see Spain listed as one of the favorites within the World Cup. Maybe not the first team that you think of, but they are always right there. Okay? Now, in terms of Hoosiers, what do we love? We love the story of Milan. We love the Milan Miracle. Why do we love the Milan Miracle in Indiana? Because in the old class basketball tournament, speaking of Muncie Central, they go up against mighty Muncie Central. They go up against the biggest program in the state, and yet they're the smallest school. And they shock the world. Cape Verde, Cabo Verde. How much does anybody even know about the country of Cape Verde? Here is an island, a chain of volcanic islands, 10 of them, off the coast of Senegal, way out off the coast of Senegal, the farthest western point of the continent of Africa. That was discovered by Portuguese explorers in the 15th century, and thus Portuguese is their native language, and I believe it might actually still be colonized or part of the Portuguese government and empire. I could be wrong in that. I don't know if they have their independence or not. But it has a population, the entire place. Would you like to guess, Eddie, the population of Cape Verde? The entire population. The entire country. 10 islands, whatever I said it was.
I don't even know. I'm really bad at these games.
490,000 people.
Okay.
Cape Verde is the size of Louisville. And they went up against one of the most historically relevant soccer programs in the world. And yesterday, yes, they didn't win. But they had a draw.
That's a win for them.
0-0. I know.
Was that their first World Cup game? Did I see that?
That is the first time ever they have appeared in the World Cup. So here they are, literally. This is the equivalent of the 16 seed, to use now college basketball terms. This is the equivalent of a 16 seed going up against, I would say Villanova, but Villanova's won 3 titles and is actually not a huge school, but a big school, a big university that has Michigan of this past year, before Michigan won their second title.
I got one for you, Jake.
A single, a team that's there every year that's won a title, and Ohio State in basketball, and yet the smallest of schools, Furman, as a 16 seed, goes in their first ever appearance in the NCAA tournament and battles to a tie. That's a win.
Here's one for Cape Verde.
St. Peter's. Yes. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
It's exactly correct. Do you think they have peacocks that live on Cape Verde?
I was just about to ask you that same question.
Can we look up animals of Cape Verde? Let's look up. It's near the Canary Islands. Peacocks and canary get along, right? It's not near the Canary Islands, but it's affiliated with the Canary Islands. Okay.
Apparently, they have a unique mix of endemic birds, reptiles, marine life.
Really?
Yeah.
Bird checklist of the world. Oh, here's a list of birds of Cape Verde.
They have larks.
Excuse me?
Not talking about Barry Larkin.
Larks. They're just larking around.
What in the
those
world
are
is a warbler?
What's that?
A warbler.
Well, that's an imbalanced bird.
Okay.
They have pheasants, grouse, and they have guinea fowl. Well, who doesn't like a guinea fowl, right?
They have ravens, yeah. A
Flamingos?
kingfisher? Oh, a gray-headed kingfisher.
They got pigeons and doves. That's cool.
Falcons.
Now, this gets into a very uncomfortable thing here. They have cuckoos.
Giant geckos?
Okay.
Wow.
That's fine. Well, that's good to get your car insured, right?
No, wait. What'd you say? What animal?
Cuckoos. Oyster catchers. Who doesn't like an oyster catcher? They got oyster catchers there. I have yet to see whether or not they have peacocks. Sandpipers. They got all kinds of birds. They got more birds than people on this island. 11 of them, right? They got one of the islands. It's nothing but birds.
Sounds like you need to make a trip out there, Jake.
Literally,
so
this is like
look.
Alfred Hitchcock's vacation spot.
Well, interesting. They have kites.
Excuse me?
Cape.
Wait a minute. I'm looking out here.
Verde kite.
It's like the one out here on 10th Street that you don't actually see that's been flying around. How thrilled do you think Stephen Holder is to be able to potentially join this conversation?
Well, he's got 30 minutes until, so hopefully we can change it by then.
Stephen Holder in 30. Scott Agnes coming up at noon. It's Query and Company on the Fan.
is Query and Company on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
You know, they got storks. Here's what's weird to me about Cape Verde. This is the, again, oxymoron of Cape Verde, right? Cape Verde, Cabo Verde, whichever way you want to say it. Now, how is this possible? How's this possible? They got all these birds flying around, okay? Literally, it's like Alfred Hitchcock land. They got all these birds on these 11 islands of Cabo Verde.
Mm-hmm.
But they've got 491,000 people. Now, what's weird about this, Eddie, is this. And this is the kind of stuff, I'm telling you, this is the kind of stuff that makes you go, Like the CNC Music Factory, actually, they were ahead of their time.
Yeah.
The CNC Music Factory came out with songs 36 years ago that actually predate this program, but if they were still doing music right now, they would say to themselves, we need to re-release that Things That Make You Go, because I was listening to that Query and Company program, and first I was wondering why they're on at 11. Now my world's all upside down because they're on 10-1 instead of 12-3, but they were on at 11, and I was listening, and the guy was talking about birds of Cape Verde and the fact that there aren't many people there, but yet they have storks. Now, if there are storks, you would think, are the storks slacking?
Do they have dorks?
I don't know about dorks. I think they seem like cool people, actually.
Yeah.
But if you have storks, don't storks deliver babies? How do they only have 490,000 people?
That's a great question. I was working at the other job, Jake, last night, and this fella pulled through, and he was listening to the station. I was like, oh, that's my station. He goes, really? I was like, yeah. He goes, which one do you work on? I was like, oh, I work with Jake Query. He goes, I love the new spot, 10-1. I can listen to you more.
Really?
I was like,
wait, he
was
meant
like, me?
listen to you or me?
Yeah, he was like, yeah, I don't like listening to that Jake guy. He loves him too much.
Well, he's correct.
He goes, I enjoy the one-liners of you.
Was he looking for a
He was
discount?
like, you're the one who make the show. The one who makes the show.
Okay.
He goes, you're the real superstar. I was like, oh, thanks.
What
Glad
about
someone sees it the same way?
What about? Let me ask you this: how tall was this guy?
I don't know. Didn't get out of the car.
He didn't.
No.
Well, he might have been a fan, for example, if he's in Cape Verde, of the dwarf bittern.
Excuse me?
The dwarf bittern.
What is that?
It's a bird. They got the gray heron there. They got the purple heron. They got all kinds of herons.
Interesting.
I mean, I pulled up the page here of birds of Cape Verde, and I'm telling you what, this thing's longer than like the Manhattan phone book, which doesn't exist anymore. I mean, it's unbelievable.
You know what they, Jake.
Size has always been an issue.
Okay. Well, listen, that in the Cape Verde bird basketball tournament, as Braden Smith was talking about there, a lot of people overlook the dwarf bittern in terms of the bird they're going to draft, but Braden Smith actually says, don't think.
Size has always been an issue.
Well, not anymore, right? I was surprised, though, when Nathan Baird mentioned that Braden Smith is, throughout the process, is showing up at just under 5'11". I would have thought right at 6 foot, but maybe I've just been giving him too much credit. I don't know.
I think he would have been, if he was in the NBA a year ago, one of 3 players listed shorter than 6 feet tall.
Who are the others? Do you know?
Well, Andrew Nimhard's brother Ryan Nimhard is 5'11".
Really?
Yes. I think Jordan McLaughlin he was with Minnesota. I don't know where he's at now, but
okay, I'll tell you one that I saw last year in the preseason that I thought was really impressive.
Yuki Kawamura. He was
in Memphis.
He was in Memphis.
That's it. That's what I was going to say. He's a Japanese player, right?
Yes, 5'7". Yes.
I watched him last year in the preseason. I thought he was. I mean, honestly, his court vision was amazing. He was really, really impressive.
He's now with Chicago.
They got a couple of these warblers over there in Cape Verde.
Yeah, what are those?
Warblers?
Yeah.
They're birds of Cape Verde.
Really?
Yeah. They got several of them there. They got all kinds of them. There's like 15 different subspecies of or species, I shouldn't say, not subspecies, of the warblers. I could spend literally all day just sitting here looking. You got sparrows over there.
Now, this is typically what happened during the 9 a.m. portion when you were on the morning show, right? Is the sleep deprivation started kicking in and you just went off the rails?
What about the olive-backed pipit? I'd like for a pet an olive-backed pipit. Can we go to Cape Verde and just get me an olive-backed pipit? I don't even like olives, but I like the olive-backed pipit. How fun would that be? Would you like to come over and see my olive-backed pipit? How much fun is that, right? Now, is the back black or like that khaki green?
Or is it the olive color?
Yeah, that's what I mean. That could be black or that could be that khaki green color.
I need to look up a picture of this.
the olive back pipit. If you can find that, let me know.
Is it P-I-P-I-T?
P-I-P-I-T, that's right.
Okay.
The
Sounds like
olive
a song
back pipit.
by Michael Jackson.
Mm-hmm. That's right. No, that'd be the P-I-P-P-Y-T.
He's a pretty little thing.
Is he?
Yeah.
There you go.
Cute fella.
Fire up some Jacko.
Cute
Okay,
fella.
let's get back to this. The big story of the day from a national standpoint is that of Brennan Sorsby. And I mentioned earlier, I'm curious of this. And I'm not trying to be, again, I'm not trying to be conspiracy Chris. I'm not trying to be negative Nancy. I'm not even trying to be pessimistic Pete or pessimistic Pippet. I'm genuinely curious of this. Here is a young man in Brennan Sorsby that I don't know Brennan Sorsby. I know he played at Indiana. I didn't know him as a person nor really as a player because yes, obviously I know that he was on the field at times, but at that time he was battling for the quarterback spot with Trace Jackson Davis's younger brother, which was like the big story, right? And he leaves from Bloomington to go to Cincinnati and then leaves from Cincinnati and goes to Texas Tech. If you were to take this story and really measure it in reverse order, if you were to do this like Pulp Fiction or like the one Seinfeld episode where you take the scenes out of order and try to put them chronologically, let's begin with the present and move backwards. With Texas Tech, they found themselves, and it's 100% their own doing, they mishandled this completely. Texas Tech has always been a decent athletic program. Never great, but competent and at times competitive. Basketball-wise, obviously, great coaches can turn things around. Before Chris Beard got there, they were most known for being the place that hired Bob Knight, and then prior to that, having Darvin Ham break a backboard in the tournament. There's your history of Texas Tech athletics for the most part. They had Mike Leach, and at that time, thank you, Mike Leach, when he was there, they had a period in the very first few years of the BCS rankings. Texas Tech at one time, I think, was number 1. And Texas Tech was, from a football standpoint, most known, and I apologize that okay, do you remember when Richard Sherman yelled at Aaron Andrews? Who was the receiver?
Yes.
Who was the receiver for the Niners?
Crabtree.
Thank you, Crabtree. Crabtree, Texas Tech guy, right?
But the sorry guy like him?
Yeah, that's a Texas Tech guy.
Yeah.
So they've been a good program in both sports, but never elite. But last year, Texas Tech really broke through, and they were right there all year long when they got into the college football playoff, and it was because they had an elite-level defense. And the reason they had an elite-level defense is because Texas Tech, from a booster standpoint, has deep pockets because they have all that oil money. And those deep pockets and all that oil money were able to accumulate and build a roster that was really good, truthfully. And then everyone knew Texas Tech, because they had gone out and through NIL and booster money, they had put together a roster that was the beginning of probably a 2-year window, this year being the big payoff. And their quarterback had gotten hurt, and so they needed a quarterback, and the top quarterback transfer out there in the portal. In today's college football world, the reality in terms of the way to say it is the number 1 or the top flight free agent was Brennan Sorsby from Cincinnati. So Sorsby announces he's going to Texas Tech. He gets $5 million. He arrives in Lubbock. And all of a sudden, the NCAA sends their version of Lee Corso to stop and step in the way and say, not so fast, my friends. Because there's a paper trail going back to the Queen City, meaning Cincinnati, not Charlotte. And that paper trail involves apps and involves cash and gambling. The number one sin in sport, gambling. Because you can, in sport, be a sketchy character. Doesn't really impact whether or not your team wins or loses games. You can, in sport, be a bad locker room guy. Get away with that a little bit as long as it's under the guise of you're ultra competitive and help your team win games. You can, in sport, be somebody that has a couple of arrests on your record. Doesn't really carry into the locker room and hurt you from winning games. But you gamble, and now you've done two things. You have compromised the integrity of your respective sport league, meaning those leagues that are financially invested with and embedded with gambling apps and other forms of it that are wanting people to have incentive to watch their games and know that any wager they're putting on it, which gives them more reason to watch and or buy a ticket or buy a subscription to watch on television or watch, and so therefore advertisers want to be a part of it. You want to make sure that people that are investing in that area financially, which leads to their emotional investment of the game, that they know that at least the wager they're putting down is done so fair and balanced, and that the game is not on the take. And there is zero, to quote Bill Polian to Jay Moore, there's not a shred of evidence that Brendan Sorsby compromised the integrity of the game. There is not a single allegation that he was fixing games or on the take in any way, shape, or form. And it would be not only irresponsible of me to say that, it would be unfair to Brendan Sorsby because that is not out there. But when you are involved in gambling, the perception then becomes if you were a player whose performance can impact or dictate the pace of a game or the result of a game, and then it comes out that you were a player that when you're not on the field, you're spending a lot of time beyond your own control by your own admission involved in gambling, then it makes people wonder. And that perception in people's minds, at no fault of Brendan Sorsby's in this regard, but that perception becomes a reality to people. And so the NCAA said, we can't have that. He can't play. And Texas Tech said, not so fast, my friends. If we are denying this young man the opportunity to play a game that we were prepared to pay him $5 million, then we are now jeopardizing the long-term future of Brendan Sorsby, and we are denying him the path towards a better life. And that's what college is all about. College is about bettering yourself both as a person and as a profession moving forward. And who are we to deny that to this young man? Even though, to an extent, his behavior denied it to himself. Then we find out that Texas Tech was not the only school that allegedly or apparently would have known about this. Because it turns out there's belief that Cincinnati and their athletic department were aware of the problems Brendan Sorsby had with gambling while he was actively playing as a Bearcat. And Cincinnati basically said, look, everybody's doing it. You get these college kids, you go to a game, and I can tell you right now, folks, I sit at Pacer games or at Clemson games, and I look around, and people are on their phone like they're playing Tetris. But they're on the apps. Boom, boom, boom. Next play, wager, in-game wager, over, under on this, and it grips people and it captivates people. And yes, the vast majority of people are probably putting down $5 on a game, $15 on a game, $50 on a game, whatever it might be. Brendan Sorsby, though, was wagering, to our knowledge, up to $90,000 over 9,000 different games while actively a college football player and wagering on college football. So, Texas Tech sits there and says, but Cincinnati knew, and I don't see you coming out on Cincinnati, except for that now the NCAA has deemed him to be ineligible, and Brendan Sorsby appeals it, and finally the NCAA says, fine, send it to a judge. And that judge says, not so fast, my friends. He's eligible because we have to keep the best interest of the young man at heart. And his road forward is to be a football player. That's what gives him his best shot at life. Now, I understand, and I'm compassionate towards the fact that Brendan Sorsby is a young person who made mistakes, and I talked about it last week. And you have to learn through your own mistakes on your own. And that's part of what this process is. And he absolutely should be given, as all of us should, the opportunity to prove that he can better himself. And that there is a better, more mature, more responsible version of himself within that he needs to deep down find and exhibit. I get it. And I'm not opposed to that. But the perceptions become reality, and the perceptions amongst the masses were for Texas Tech. They were willing to sell their soul to the devil in order to get him to play because he was the missing link between Texas Tech and a mythical national championship. And Texas Tech got bailed out in all of this because now we find out Brendan Sorsby said, okay, I'm just going to enter my name into the NFL compensatory draft, the supplemental draft of compensatory picks. So, based on that, if we were to localize said story, the first would be this. Several people asked me, could the Colts just take a flyer on Brendan Sorsby? And my answer to that is, I don't believe so. I don't know so, but I don't believe so, and I'll tell you why. 2 reasons. Number one, let's be real. Have the Colts taken their chance on players in the past that had issue? Yes, Chad Kelly comes to mind. But the Colts also have, number one, look at Isaiah Rodgers. Mm-hmm. The second that Isaiah Rodgers' name came out and the NFL disciplined him, gone. The Colts didn't wait through that, which was their right. The Colts didn't wait through it. They didn't, allow him to reform himself. And his allegations of gambling and the amount that he was doing were far less egregious than that of Brendan Sorsby, truth be told. But he violated NFL rules, and so the Colts said, enough. And I truly believe this. I truly believe, I don't know this, but I truly believe that the Colts acted swiftly in the case of Isaiah Rodgers, and the Colts would also not take a flyer on Brendan Sorsby for the following 2 reasons. The first being, regardless of the gambling issue, quarterback is not a position right now where they need more experiments in the locker room. They already have, literally, the Colts quarterback room is like the biology hallway at North Central High School. Like, you can smell the experiments from a mile away. They got the experiment of Riley Leonard, who I think, could be a decent backup player. You got the experiment of Anthony Richardson, which they go back and forth on, and they have the lab coat on one day and they don't the next, and who knows what's going on. And to an extent, they have the experiment of Daniel Jones, of the reinvention of a quarterback that needed a new lease. But the Colts also have within that building, and again, I don't know this, but it makes perfect, plausible sense to me. If you go back and you look at the play that ended the career of Woody Hayes, Gator Bowl, 78, Ohio State and Clemson. Charlie Bauman, Clemson, gets an interception, runs it along the sideline, steps out of bounds, and the Ohio State head coach, the fiery but legendary Woody Hayes, punches him right in the throat. And it ended the career of Woody Hayes. As a matter of fact, Woody Hayes, when that happened, not only lost his job over it, but he basically went into hiding and didn't issue any sort of statement on it until another coach called him and said, Coach, you have to make a public apology here. You have to come out and say, I'm sorry for what I did. And you have to be the bigger man because you're the adult in the room, and that's a college student that you punched for the world to see. And Woody Hayes said, you're right. And Woody Hayes offered that apology to save face a little bit in this play that happened that ended his career. And that coach that called him and begged him to do that was an Ohio State alum that knew a little bit about coaching by the name of Bob Knight. But the quarterback that threw that pass was Art Schlichter. And if you do the numbers on it and you do the math on it, you go, wait a minute, Art Schlichter came with the Baltimore Colts to Indianapolis in 1984, 6 years later. How young was he? Exactly. Ohio State was the preeminent college football program in America with the preeminent coach in America, and yet their quarterback in a bowl game was a young player by the name of Art Schlichter in an era where young players didn't play. But that's how big a prodigy Art Schlichter was. That's how elite a talent Art Schlichter was. That's how generational Art Schlichter was as an athlete that could throw across his body, run. He was Elway-esque. And so the Colts, who ultimately would draft John Elway as well, drafted Art Schlichter, and the Colts got burnt. Now, what possibly in a hill of beans does that have to do with the Indianapolis Colts in 2026? There are people within that organization that were around in that era. And Art Schlichter, who's still, and maybe it's unfair, I'm not saying Brendan Sorsby is Art Schlichter, but perceptions. And the name Art Schlichter still does ring a little bit on 56th Street because there are people within the organization that are not only familiar with Schlichter, but were there when they saw how the Colts continued to try to work with a young Art Schlichter because of the promise that he showed. A lot more promise and a lot more expectation and a lot more pedigree as a player before entering the NFL than Brendan Sorsby has. And even with that, the Colts got burnt over and over. And people around Central Indiana got burnt over and over. And for that reason, I don't believe the Colts. And I know it's crazy to make that sort of a leap, but it's still fresh in the mind to a lot of people. And for that reason, I don't think Brendan Sorsby would be a viable option for the Colts, not only because they don't need it, but because it's a headache they've been through before.
Jake, that's not even factoring in what it would cost to have him with the Colts, because I don't know how well you know the supplemental draft and how it works, but teams will have to wager whatever round they would take him in the 27 draft. So, for example, let's say Jake Query enters the NFL supplemental draft, and you would have to do it in 6 days. So you do it. And, okay, NFL teams are, figuring this out, whatever. Draft comes around, and you throw in, I want to wager, it's an auction style, a third-round pick. So you're giving up a third-round pick in the 2027 draft class for Jake Query. And that's what the Colts and the rest of these NFL teams would have to ponder. What draft pick are we comfortable surrendering in the 27 draft class? Now, if there are multiple teams that submit the same pick, so you submit a third-round pick, I submit a third-round pick, the teams are divided into three groups based on the previous season. Group 1 is teams with 6 or fewer wins. Group 2 is non-playoff teams with more than 6 wins. And Group 3, which consists of 14 teams, those are the playoff teams. And then the NFL does like a blind drawing, and however the rankings fall in that blind drawing, it goes in order of that. So if I had the first pick on the blind drawing, then I would get Sorsby over you, for example.
Someone will take a flyer
I agree.
I just don't think it's going to be here. Stephen Holder, by the way. Fashion tips with Stephen next.
You're listening to Query and Company on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
Now, do we know where Stephen is? Are we tracking down Stephen? Is that what we're doing?
Yeah,
do we
tracking him down.
Do we need to send a Cape Verde carrier pigeon to find Stephen? We've learned. See, this is what we do on this show, or we try to do, is educate and entertain. And I know there are people out there getting in their car right now, and they're like, "Well, where's the show that I used to listen to every day at 11:30?" And what happened is we just slid things down, so now we're 10-1. And I apologize for people that are used to or anticipating the show that they have been hearing, and I'm hoping they'll give it a chance. But that's why we're trying to educate and entertain today. Now, I just sent Stephen a photo after our garden district garden attire. Last week when Stephen was on, I was asking him, he's a fashionable guy. if he knows anything about garden attire. And then I was actually on the phone with Steven, not on the radio, but when I was out looking for the pants that I was going to wear to said garden attire event. And then we went to the event and took a photo, and I'd like to know because he's a stylish dude. And I've been waiting, clamoring, and yes, I could call him on my own, but I thought, I'll wait until we're on the air to find out whether or not he approves of our garden attire. Are you familiar with, Eddie, had you heard of, before we got into it, what garden attire is? Were you familiar with that?
No, I'm not a fashionable guy, Jake, so no.
You're not a fashionable guy?
No.
How many suits do you own?
3.
Does anybody own ties anymore? I have a closet with literally 60 ties in it. And I have some really nice ties. I worked in TV for a long time, and I have some really nice ties. But I don't know that there's any occasion for me to wear a tie anymore. Because if you wear it, I think most people then say, when's the court date? Right? Like, you just don't see that many people wearing neckties anymore. Now, the other thing about the Brendan Sorsby scenario, before we get to Steven, that I want to mention is I'm not trying to speak this into existence, which we do from time to time. And I'm not saying in any way, shape, or form. I want to be very clear. I have no reason to believe, none of it, that there is any fault here. But if Cincinnati is now getting discussed or whispered about or written about the fact of what did they know about Brendan Sorsby's gambling, and if Texas Tech is getting dragged through the mud because they were about to take him on despite knowing his history of gambling, at what point does that then get stuck with and attached to the program where he began his career and also where it would appear his gambling began, with Indiana? And does Indiana eventually start getting asked some questions? I don't know the answer to that. I worry about it. That's a better way of saying it. I worry about it for the sake of Indiana. Did you say we have Steven? Stephen Holder joins us, and before we get into the Brendan Sorsby conversation, let's get to the most important subject matter, Stephen, and that's me.
Okay.
The last time that we had you on, we were discussing, and you were helping as my fashion consultant with my garden attire, and I can't remember if I sent you the photo. I just sent you, if you can look at your phone, I just sent you the photo of us in our garden attire.
I'm looking at it.
I want you to grade me A to F, as I do on this show, on whether or not I or the two of us pulled off the garden attire.
Well, I was never worried about your better half. Okay.
Okay.
Let's be honest.
Okay.
She ain't the issue here. Okay.
Thank you. Okay.
I mean, that is a compliment to you, I guess, in a roundabout way.
Right.
So yeah, I think she did well. You did. No, actually, I actually think you pulled it off, because I mean, Sarah Sucker is like immediate, I think, messaging. It's like there's like a subliminal message to like, I got it. I got the theme. That's exactly what it means, in my opinion. Okay. And I am no fashion expert, but when you say like garden, sort of like, spring wedding attire, that sort of thing, which is kind of what this, reminds me of. Sarah Sucker is an immediate, like,
it's
check.
It's basically the Kentucky Derby without hats, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now,
yeah, I think that's fair.
Okay, so the photo itself. So here's my tip for anybody listening, because I think this is becoming a thing now. Is this the garden attire? Because it was nice. It was a wonderful event. And
yeah.
It was.
And this
great.
is why people tune in for fashion
That's
advice
right.
from Jay.
That's
Query.
exactly right.
Yeah, so go ahead.
So seersucker pants, a coral colored shirt. Mine was a lighter orange, and then the white shoes are okay with it, right?
Yeah, I think yes. In fact, light color shoes I think are automatic here.
There you go. So it's an easy combo. And then Shannon's dress was outrageously expensive from a large department store, or actually it was, or it may have been actually that it was delivered the night before from the place where you can get everything from A to Z. Okay, Stephen, let's get to this, and that is we'll piggyback off the conversation we were just having, Eddie and I were. Brendan Sorsby, a lot of people have asked me now that he has put his name into the supplemental NFL draft, any chance the Colts take a flyer on it and say why not?
Well, I'll start with one thing. The topic you were discussing as I was coming on, which is, his gambling past and how much gets dug into that, right? In terms of the previous schools. I predict the NCAA wants nothing to do with this and will not dig.
Okay.
So that is my prediction. I don't know anything about it, but I suspect, knowing the NCAA, they were very, very, very concerned about this yesterday. But today, I suspect they want nothing to do with this anymore. So we'll see. I would say in terms of the Colts, right? Is that where we're going here? I think for them, this is not likely. And here are a couple of reasons. Number one, they're very, very much wanting to send the message that they are all in on Daniel Jones. And I don't know that acquiring Brandon Sorsby necessarily changes that, but it certainly clouds the message. And for whatever reason, this is a very important thing to the organization, that Daniel Jones has their backing and that he understands that they believe in him. My understanding is that the lack of that, or the lack of his feeling that in New York, really adversely affected him, which I could understand, right? I mean, he got thrown under the bus a lot, but he didn't play that well either. So, I mean, that's just how it is. But I do think that had sort of a tangible effect on him. And the Colts are being very careful to not repeat that mistake with him. So that's the first thing. Right or wrong, here, neither here nor there. Those are facts. The other thing is they've had a gambling scandal before with Isaiah Rodgers on their own roster. And, they were highly upset about that situation.
And they were brisk, right? I mean, they wasted no time.
Yeah, they got rid of him pretty quickly. And so I just wonder if, since they've been burned by that before, if they just kind of stay clear. That's just my suspicion there.
And Stephen, let's get to this, because it's kind of the reality. I mean, I want to be careful here when I'm talking about Brendan Sorsby, because I'm not sitting here saying, well, everybody does it. I mean, big deal. And that's not at all what I'm saying. But the shock value of a gambling scandal today is different than it was in the past because of the accessibility about it. And I think there's almost the expectation of people of, gosh, how many rocks do you this has to be, how many are there that we don't know about, so to speak? If you were to put truth serum in the Colts with Isaiah Rodgers, do you think in retrospect that the Colts would look back and say, maybe we should have worked with him more and actually given benefit of the doubt because he, at least apparently, learned his lesson and is now a good contributing player within the NFL? Do you think they in any way, shape, or form have felt that they acted too swiftly?
It's a good question. I don't think they do. And now, one thing I will say, just having known Isaiah when he was here, relatively well, I do think that he had a very clear level of immaturity,
right,
that he had to grow out of. There's no question about that. I think he has certainly grown some, at least, since then. I mean, you can't help but grow through that experience, right? But he definitely had a very immature element to him. And so when it happened, I'm not saying I was like, well, that ain't a surprise. But it was like, if you had to pick, a handful of players on the roster who might make a really stupid mistake, you'd probably be on the list.
Right.
And so I think when you consider all of that, I think the question then, that you pose would be like, should the Colts have taken that into consideration? Was he just a kid that needed to grow up? I mean, I think that's probably true, but he also likely had some other indiscretions that we don't know about. That's also possible, right? Because, as I said, it was very clear that he was immature. So I think there was probably other infractions maybe there that they had to maybe help him with. So that might have been the end of his rope. But I think at least he did get a second chance generally speaking, with the NFL, and did get reinstated, paid a heavy price. And so I don't think they have regrets, but it's not a bad question to ask. Like, should they have taken a step back? I do think he would have and has grown. So, good question.
Stephen, let me ask you. Stephen Holder, my guest, ESPN.com is where you can read his work, and of course, ESPN, you see him as well, and usually, not even usually, all the time fashionable. That's why I consulted with him on my seersucker pants. If the NFL, which is the NFL, do you think more, if either of these two, which has bigger potential for the NFL to regret partnering with? Some of the sports gambling apps because of the potential of that conflict of interest like what we're seeing, or the ticket resale companies because of also then it takes away and it neuters franchises from condemning its fans from allowing opponents into the stadiums, which has been issue here.
That's a great question because they make a lot of money from both, I presume. That's interesting. I think from a league perspective, the bigger concern probably should be the gambling connection. And the reason for that, and I'm talking like Roger Goodell and his staff, because the ticket issue, all they care about is that tickets sell, right? And they sell very well. Now, individual teams will care a lot about the ticket situation and probably a lot less about the gambling aspect of it. So I think I'm giving I'm splitting the baby here, but I think if you're looking at it from 345 Park Avenue in New York, where they sit in those corner offices, I think for you, the delicate situation is your relationship with the gambling companies for sure. But they ain't giving up the cash, though. Let's be clear. They are not giving that up. But I think at the team level, yeah, I mean, you look at what happened, say, with I think, what was this, 2 years ago, the Caleb Williams rookie season, that Bears game here in Indianapolis. I mean, I have never seen such a thing in my life. It was, I understand that to be, I think, has this been established? I think that was the most expensive home game on average in Colts history, so just sort of a collision of factors there, right? The proximity of Chicago, Caleb Williams, and the hype of Chicago, all that. So anyway, I mean, that's a terrible development for your home fans, a situation like that. So I would say the answer really is that both situations suck on our side of it, right? Because the gambling undermines the integrity of the game, and the ticket situation just frustrates the average Joe Sixpack fan. So I don't know if this is good for anybody.
Well, it's kind of hard to start worrying about and wringing your hands and holding town hall meetings about the fox in the hen house when you find out that he's actually paying rent. You know what I mean?
Right.
If you're making money off of him, you're like, well, okay. I mean, then it becomes a little bit tricky. Stephen, since we have talked last, and when you sit back and think about it, and now that you've had time to kind of absorb, Stephen Holder, my guest from ESPN, the off season now for the Colts, which essentially, let's be real, the off season it's just now kind of beginning. I mean, all of the workouts, everything, the team gatherings, that's all done now. And so now it's wait and see time before training camp. Is there any sort of a storyline that you thought about and thought, you know what? I didn't have this on my bingo card, but I'm genuinely curious to see how this develops. And it's not named Daniel Jones and it's not named Alec Pierce, but I find it intriguing. Is there anything that jumps out at you in a franchise that otherwise, to be honest with you, I think is kind of void of storylines?
No, they don't have a lot of huge storylines. That's true. But I think we've probably touched on this a little bit, but I think it bears more conversation, or warrants, I should say, more conversation. It is the youth on defense. Okay, they have, and actually, I'm actually writing about this today, so I'll have an article about this. But you have, for every Sauce Gardner and DeForest Buckner and Grover Stewart on that defense, you have a C.J. Allen or A.J. Halsey or young guys. We may have, I think, 5 to 6 very, very young starters or core players on that defense. And when I say very young, I mean first year, second year. That's what we're talking about. And I think that is certainly an interesting development, one that you could look at in two ways. You could look at it like, oh man, we're really excited about these young, talented players with new blood. And then there's the other side of that coin. Young, exciting players screw up a lot. And that's fine. But you have to live with the ups and the downs, and there will be both. So I do think that is something that Colts fans are just going to have to get their heads around when the season starts. You are going to see a little bit of potentially a little bit of a roller coaster on defense. And that's just how it's going to be. So I'm interested to see how that plays out. And I do think that warrants a little more conversation.
Do you
kind
think,
of preview what's coming?
Stephen, when we talk about young players in the NFL, I know, the biggest issue, and there are a lot of people that will tell you, like a Trevor Lawrence or, for that matter, the Alabama quarterbacks, a lot of them that came out, the biggest adjustment they had to make was that they were throwing to receivers. Trevor Lawrence was throwing to guys that all ended up playing on Sunday, right? So he's throwing to guys that were always 2 steps ahead of their defender because they're just getting out, beyond a defense at the college level. The same is true of those elite receivers you see at Alabama. Then you get to the NFL, and there are no windows. And so you've got to, everything's different. When you look at the adjustment that college players have to make, we know about the speed is what I'm getting at, and the windows collapsing or not even being there in general. But is there schematic difference between the college game and the pro game? Is it simply a matter of adjusting to the size and speed of the NFL, or is there also a different style of play in the NFL that is not played at the college level?
Yeah, well, first of all, you just hit on something that is one of my big pet peeves about college football, that as someone who just that looks at the game at a different level and not with my heart and probably more with my head, I watch college football and I'm like, why is everybody so wide open? What am I watching here? It's just not real. It's not real. Okay. I love, the pomp and circumstance is great, but it's just not real. That when you compare to pro football, they get to the NFL and that is non-existent. So I'm glad you pointed that out. Anyhow, to your question, I think there is more than just the speed of the game. It's the volume of scheme. Okay. The volume that you have to handle and have to study. And that is why a lot of times you do see very good players from college maybe come in and don't get that immediate playing time, and people wonder why. And it's because, well, maybe the guy needs to work harder. He might need to study his playbook more. And so that is just a reality. There are variations, right? There are some college programs that do have maybe a heavier volume, and that gives those players an edge in the draft for sure, because scouts and GMs pay attention to that, or they play a pro style of defense or what have you. That matters. But yes, the volume is the biggest difference. I mean, there's going to be, coverage A and then coverage A.1 and 0.2 and all these variations. And if this, then that, that gets really, really difficult to absorb. And you've got to be on the screws for sure.
Stephen Holder, ESPN.com, ESPN Television as well, and free fashion advice. Stephen, appreciate it as always, man.
All right, jack of all trades.
That's right. That's right. Stephen Holder. Speaking of fashion advice, several have asked, so I will reiterate. The shirt that I'm wearing, the Golden Hoosier, it is strictly when we were in St. Louis 2 years ago for the IndyCar race, I used to live in St. Louis, so all the guys were like, hey, where's a good place to eat? And I was like, well, there's a cool neighborhood in South City that always has cool spots. We can find one. And this is just an older bar in St. Louis. And in Missouri, the term Hoosier means like hillbilly redneck. It does not mean a person from Indiana. And so there was a guy that I guess, it was joking, meaning I'm a hillbilly redneck, but I've opened this great restaurant bar, so I'm a Golden Hoosier. So they sell T-shirts and hats that just say Golden Hoosier, and I thought it was funny because it literally is the confluence of Indiana and Purdue and Indianapolis, so I bought the shirt. There's a story, and I don't know if it's a story or not. I want to have a discussion with Scott Agnes next about whether or not something could potentially relate to the Pacers and be newsworthy, or if it's not, and we need to not dive into it. It's weird the way I said it, but I'll explain what I mean next.
You're listening to Query and Company on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
I love this song. You know that, right? Is there a reason you're playing it?
You've been on the animal fix from Cape Verde, so.
They have all kinds of fabulous animals, mostly birds in Cape Verde, right? Do you know who this is, by the way, that sings this song without looking, Eddie?
I already knew because I'd already seen. I had to look it up.
This band, majorly popular at Chuck E. Cheese, right?
I was going to say, yeah, great place.
They're very popular
mention.
at Aladdin's Castle, correct?
Yeah, any arcade, really, for the most part.
Correct. The Tokens, fabulous song. And vividly reminds me of one of the junior spec acts of 1988, at North Central High School. No one other than the 12 people listening that were at North Central High School in my era would know what I'm talking about when I say junior spec. I erred, by the way, because I said next. Now I mean next. Scott Agnes is going to join us, and there is a sad story, and I don't make light in any way, shape, or form of it, that came out with TMZ yesterday. And Scott and I were discussing it last night, and I don't know if it's newsworthy or not, but I'm going to bring it up, which I guess means it is. We'll explain next.
listening to Query and Company on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
We doing all bird songs the rest of the show here?
I sure can.
We can play songs by the birds, the Eagles, right? All kinds of. Do you think that the Cape Verde, for those that are just joining the show, by the way,
Where have you been?
We mentioned earlier that Cape Verde is the Milan miracle of the World Cup so far. Their very first appearance, they're taking on Spain, who is one of the powers. Spain has a World Cup title. They have been in 16 of the 22 World Cups. I think most would say they're considered probably a top 6 to 10 team historically, maybe top 5. I mean, I'm not a soccer expert, but, you got Brazil, you got Argentina. They're, in Spain, England, Spain, France. Either way, Cape Verde yesterday going to a scoreless draw with Spain, which is really impressive. And then on top of that, we looked it up in Spain and Cape Verde. I find this very fascinating. They've got fewer than 500,000 people in the entire country, a chain of 11 volcanic islands. But they got all these birds living there, which includes storks. And considering the duty and the job and the responsibility of a stork, you would think that they have more people. I don't know. Is this where the storks are going when they're not delivering babies in the rest of the world? Is this like the North Pole to them and they just hang out there and then they go fly elsewhere and deliver babies?
I don't know what the job and the duty is of a stork, Jake, so you'll have to enlighten me on that.
Storks deliver babies. Have you not seen, like, in people's front yard when they have a baby, they like the sign, like, it's a boy and it's a stork, or a girl, it's a stork? I thought that was like household knowledge that storks are baby deliverers. Am I wrong in this?
I don't know.
Do we have Scott, by the way? Scott Agnes joins us now from Fieldhouse Files. Scott, are you aware of the mythical or legendary role of a stork?
I am not, no.
Am I the only person like that just assume? Sometimes I'm guilty of assuming that people know things. Like, are you not familiar? Have you never seen the imagery of a stork bird with, like, in its beak with the I don't know what you would call it, the cloth with a baby in it, delivering a baby? Anybody? So Eddie, you're not familiar?
I think I've seen maybe that photo, not delivering a baby, but like just a bird with a bird in it or something in its mouth. But no, not to this extent. I'm unaware. Totally.
It's a centuries-old myth rooted in folklore and cultural symbolism. So no, I am not aware of this.
Well, I'll tell you what. You guys talk. I'm going to go out and I'm out of Metamucil, so I'm going to head to the store real quick, and I'll be back. Scott, I want to get into, before we get into the fever and the fact that Caitlin Clark and Raven Johnson both on the injury report, Stephanie White losing her voice, and the fever in action tonight. But I'm curious of this. You and I were talking about this last night, and it is not, I mean, I couldn't figure out, and I'm going to bring it up on the radio, so maybe I'm just as guilty here. But TMZ yesterday, I think it was the lead story on TMZ, as a matter of fact. And TMZ had a column up or a story about the fact that Tyrese Halliburton's fiance was on her bachelorette party, which was pretty public. I mean, they were posting it, I mean, in a good way, right? I mean, posting beautiful photos and videos and fun things with she and her girlfriends from Iowa State University. And apparently one of the attendees of the bachelorette party passed away during the bachelorette party. And TMZ was reporting on this without knowledge or without sharing the information as to how this young woman passed. Two-part question. The first is, and I don't know, and I just brought it up, so maybe that's irresponsible of me, but do you think this is newsworthy? Or because it was not Tyrese Halliburton's fiance, but rather a member of the bridal party, does it feel sensationalized? Your thoughts?
Yeah, Jake, I definitely feel like it's sensationalized. I look back at the tweet while you're talking there. It's got almost 13 million views. Without the connection to Tyrese and his fiance, unfortunately, it's not getting that level of attention. Then they did a follow-up story about behind the scenes or inside the party. It's like that. It just all feels unnecessary to me. It all came to light because yesterday the obituary of that young woman were made public and published, and so that's where we learned about her. But obviously nothing about that incident. But it's just a tragic thing. It's this young woman trying to celebrate one of her friends and one of the greatest moments she'll ever celebrate, and something went wrong, and you just feel bad for her and her family.
And I want to point out as well, I think the family issued a statement saying that at this time there does not appear to be anything nefarious. I mean, that this literally could have been or is expected to have been just a tragic health episode, I think is how they described it. And this is also, I will admit this, Scott, and I'm embarrassed to say it, but I'm in the sake of transparency, the true loss here is exactly what we just discussed. And then there is part of me deep down that's like, you feel for Tyrese Halliburton and his fiance as well, because this would be a to your point. I mean, here you have this euphoric thing and then this tragic thing. And for like a half a second, not for the totality of it, Scott, but for like a half a second, my first thought was, how's that going to impact like Halliburton's recovery or his ability to play or his focus or whatever else? And then I thought, Jakey, that's the dumbest and most selfish thing I've ever heard, because that's just irrelevant. But yet at the same time, there's this 1% of it, to your point, that feels like it's relevant, or else it wouldn't have been the lead on a major website, correct?
Yeah, that's trying to make it a real story, actually, right? Though
Yeah.
it's the basketball aspect, and so if you're going to name the people involved, that seems to be what the story should be. You just feel bad. How many of her friends or family or neighbors found out about this through TMZ?
Right.
And that was probably one of the first things I thought about. It's like, oh my goodness, this girl had an incredible, probably had a fun trip. I think this was kind of near the beginning because you're right. All of them were posting often about it. So it's not like this was something that they were quiet about. And yeah, good for them. They were having fun. But then tragically, the worst happens. You never expect it, but it apparently did in this case.
Okay, Scott, let's get to, first off, the Fever. We'll talk a little bit Pacers as well, but let's begin with the Fever. In action tonight, taking on Toronto, and have won 3 in a row. What has been the difference for them in this 3-game win streak now that they were not doing before?
Yeah, I think the defense, first of all, has been much better. That you're not seeing opponents score a ton of points, with the one exception of that Chicago game where both teams scored over 100. And the Fever, by the way, last Thursday set a franchise record with 114 points. I'm not sure I expected to see that in this league. Remember, they only play 40-minute games, too, compared to the NBA, where it's a 48-minute game. And this one obviously then went into overtime, so it used that additional time. I think you're also seeing a lot of players feel more comfortable within their roles. One of the things I've appreciated over the last couple of games is Lexi Hall and Sophie Cunningham being ready on the perimeter, in the corners for those spray out threes, which they've taken advantage of. I mean, Sophie Cunningham's finished the last game. I think that can do wonders for her confidence because, Jake, I go back to that moment at Connecticut. That was her first time visiting and playing back there in 10 months, and she suffered a torn MCL, and that was an emotional and a pivot point for the Fever season last year. They were emotional in the locker room at halftime and afterward and even at the podium, and I think that was really a catalyst to the rest of their season. But for her to go back there, not only play well, but to score the Fever's final 11 points, they need more from Sophie and everybody, and so I think that can do wonders for her moving forward. And then the other thing is Caitlin has quietly been great. 25-plus points, these 10 assists. She is rounding into form once again. And by the way, we should note, what's tonight? It will be her 13th game played of the season, matching what she did last season.
Yeah, I think that's a big thing too, Scott, is they just didn't last year. I think we could all sit here and nitpick and scrutinize what was going wrong for them at the beginning of the season, but we overlooked the fact that this is a group whose star player And really the straw mixing the drink was not a part of the vast majority of the end of the year last year. And so therefore there is a reacquaintance period, or to some extent just an acquaintance period, right? Of everybody figuring out how to play with one another.
Yeah, entirely. That's the thing. Sophie didn't finish the season. Caitlin Clark did not finish the season. Plus, then you throw in Monique Billings, who's had a good game here and there. Maisha Hines-Allen, who has stepped up nicely, I think, off the bench, and her role as those two are trying to establish and better understand the ways in which they can contribute to this team. It's what they've done in the last week, Jake, is exactly what they needed to do against lesser opponents. Now they're home for 5 of their next 6 games. They only leave the city once, and that's to go to Atlanta this weekend. Throughout the rest of June, by the way.
You know, talking of Hines-Allen, Maisha Hines-Allen, Scott Agnes is my guest, Fieldhouse Files, where you can read his work. Scott, I think every team has an X-factor player. That's an overused term, but a player that is kind of a safety net player that can do a couple of different dirty work things that the rest of the roster either doesn't want to do or just doesn't think to do. And I think players like that are really important in championship level or aspiring teams. Is Hines-Allen that player for this roster, or can she be?
I would say she can be. She can be the tough player inside that can hold everyone accountable, that you don't want to mess with,
right,
is one of the ways I look at it, right? And I think every team needs that as well. The first player that came to mind when you were laying out that criteria to me was Lexi Hall. Does not matter how much she scores. Does not matter how much points. She's going to play defense. She's probably going to draw 2 charges per game, and she's going to be available for as long as you want. She has the endurance, all that type of stuff. But for Hines-Allen, to me, she's the enforcer underneath. She plays well with others out there. I think there was a learning curve I saw the first couple of weeks with Caitlin, where to be, where to stay out of her way, where to hand it off to her to put in her sweet spot. But it goes back to what you were saying. There's a learning curve, and those two had not spent time together. And I think they're getting better with that. But you absolutely need someone to do those dirty works, and she's one of them.
The injury, and I know it's probably a minuscule one because I think it's simply questionable tonight for the rookie guard and Raven Johnson, who yesterday at the end of practice tweaked her ankle. That puts her as questionable tonight. Caitlin Clark is probable with the back injury. The Johnson seemingly of late is getting more minutes. Is this injury, even though it's probably, let's just say it's going to be a one-game thing, Scott, but is this an important period for her because she's finally starting to get some minutes out there and find her way in, and it seems to me that she would be a really important piece for what the Fever want to do defensively. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I think it's a good measuring or mark point for her because this would be her first injury as a pro and what to go through that. And I don't think she missed any games or many at South Carolina in her years. So I think this, like it was for Clark last season, is all new to her. And again, the Fever are going to take that big picture vision in mind for this season with this team. And so with whether it's Caitlin or Raven Johnson or Sophie Cunningham, it was the other game, right? She had that right elbow injury, sat out one game, came back, knocked down that big shots late in the game. And it was funny to see the celebrations between her and Clark with the elbow. But nonetheless, yeah, you hope this is relatively minor. The fact that she's not already ruled out for the game suggests it's a lighter sprain, just kind of a tweak. And when you're not playing, if she does not play, there's, especially as a rookie, there's many things you're able to pick up when you don't have that processing, I think, right in your mind where you're thinking about who you're going to guard or what they emphasized earlier in the day. You can just watch how things play out and take notes.
By the way, Eddie, just so you know, Scott Agnes, our guest from Fieldhouse Files, somebody just texted me this, by the way. Jake, the thing about Storks is common knowledge. Eddie's a dork.
I've never did.
How about that?
Okay.
You're catching strays on the Stork convo.
I don't care, Jake. There's somebody who told me last night at my other job that I am the MVP of the show, and that's why they listen to this show every day now.
You're the Maisha Hines-Allen of the program?
No,
is that
I'm
what
the
you're
Caitlin
saying?
Clark of the program, Jake.
Okay.
I am the star.
Okay.
I am what makes this show flow.
Scott, who would you say is the star of the program?
Well, I'm just looking at your face with your name behind it, so it's hard to go elsewhere. And by the way, congratulations on the contract extension and the new time slot. That you would never bypass an opportunity to celebrate that.
Well, and in this line of work, you're correct about that. And yesterday I got the whistle blown on me because my alarm went off while we were on the air at 11:20. That's usually when I get up, so that's been an adjustment, no question about it. I want to ask you one other thing about Caitlin Clark, Scott.
Mm-hmm.
She's talked about how, I think the wording that she used was like she wanted to silence the noise. And Stephanie White has become a little bit more outspoken, even though she's now got like laryngitis and has lost her voice. Maybe that's why, because she's been outspoken about this, about, the bots and just the white noise of this vortex, as I call it, around Caitlin Clark, which there's a good and a bad to that. But you and I have talked about it, about all of the online chatter and scrutiny and everything that comes with. I mean, you and I both got caught up in this current of it all about 2 weeks ago. Can this be a negative? Is this a franchise that someone as transcendent as Caitlin Clark and as wonderful as that is from a marketing standpoint, is there a danger at the fault of no one in getting swept up in that and having it be a distraction, and with a fever close to a breaking point with that?
I do not think there was any kind of close to some kind of breaking point. I think a lot of it, I wonder, is how much if at all, does that seep in to the locker room? That's what Stephanie White, this coaching staff, absolutely is guarding against. And that's nothing new. It's something Coach White was talking about last season as well. But the challenge becomes the constant questioning in its own right becomes an annoyance. Could it become a distraction, a frustration? Because these are not valid reports that anyone's referencing. I noticed the individual that asked the question didn't even ask the question straight up. It said there are reports. What are the reports? Who is reporting this, right? And so the framing of it basically leaned into, there's videos on the internet saying this. Do you want to comment on it? And that puts reporters in a tough spot here, because it's a question certainly a lot of fans wonder about, but also we have not seen anything to prove it. We have not seen very much. I forget what it was, whether it was turmoil or fraction. I just don't see it. I see this team that is going through ups and downs like any team and trying to fight through it. The challenge is most teams don't have these random accounts. They don't have these people speculating on a number of things and wanting to fire a coach at every one decision. So that's something they have to guard against. It's a big reason why I know Coach White went off social media like 2 years ago.
Right. She told us that. She deleted the apps and the whole deal. Okay, Scott, I'm going to talk more about this in just a couple of minutes in terms of what I find to be an interesting interweave of a bunch of different teams, and I'll get back into that with everybody in a moment here, but it's epicentered on Braden Smith and the Pacers and the workouts. Yesterday, Braden Smith, Trey Kaufman-Renn working out for the Pacers. Pacers not having the first-round pick. Do you believe that they will still be active within the draft, or do you believe the roster that we see right now in terms of the key pieces are what they're pushing in on, and that's what we're going to see? Do you think they still make changes within their core?
I believe they'll try to make changes, whether they can find that dance partner to agree to a deal or something. I think right now they know they're in an opportune time, an optimistic time here, where they have to capitalize on this window, where you have really a 2-year period with Siakam, with Halliburton, and everybody else. And what have we seen, Jake, in the NBA these last 8 years? A brand new winner every single year. How many people were saying the Thunder might win the next 3, or Boston might, who's going to stop them the next several years? That has not at all been the case. And so there's no guarantee the Pacers will get even close back to the finals through all of this, whether it's things you can't prevent a ton, like injuries, or it's other teams rising to the top. A Knicks team, by the way, that the Pacers knocked out the last couple of years. So I think they are not content, but I think they like exactly where they're at. They like adding Zubats, and I think we're going to see him played in a variety of ways, meaning the team is going to look a little bit different than it has certainly before, especially in the Miles Turner's years. But if you can go out and make a trade, and that's where this front office has been at their best, I think that is where you turn to those future assets and you're willing to risk some of them on a good deal because you never know when you'll get back to this point in time where you can be a contender again.
Okay, each of you guys give me a guess here. Scott, we'll begin with you. Giannis ends up where?
I'll say Boston.
Okay. Eddie, Boston's off the board. Giannis ends up where?
Give me Will Smith's hit.
What's that?
Miami.
Okay. I guess based on your guys' picks, if we're not allowed to double up, I'll say stays in Milwaukee. Now, that's the dumbest thing possible, I realize. Scott, Miles Turner next year plays where?
Ooh. I'm not sure about that one. I don't. But that's a situation for him, though, is look, he got accomplished what he wanted to get accomplished, and that was to maximize his value at a great time. And what I've learned in my time covering this league is if you have the chance, capitalize on your money while you can, especially if you're not that top-tier guy. Everybody will pay you. I mean, capitalize while you can and figure out where you're playing later because you can get moved. You could get waived. Damian Lillard wanted to play for the Bucks, right? Or, and ended up there and leaned into that and then got waived, then went back to Portland. Figure out your location, but take care of yourself and your family first.
I mean, unpopular opinion, and not to say a quote that the kids say, but when it comes to Miles Turner and going and getting that paycheck, like, I don't hate him for it. You know what I mean? I get it. I don't blame him. I don't blame him in any way, shape, or form, but it obviously has, and still continues to have ripples throughout the NBA. Fieldhouse Files, where you can read Scott's work, Fever in action tonight, taking on Toronto. Scott, appreciate it.
Okay. Thanks, Jake.
Scott Agnes joining us on the program. I do think Giannis, Eddie, the other question would be this. Do you think that Giannis, he's a wonderful talent, but are we past the time of Giannis being epicenter for a title? Does he fall now into the James Harden category of people giving him big-time money and chasing it, thinking he's the final piece, and then instantly realizing why he was available? I
think he's more Kevin Durant than he is James Harden because he's like Durant to where he's got the championship, he's got the notoriety, he plays both sides of the floor at a high level. I think the problem with Giannis is finding a team that'll fit his playing style because Giannis is Giannis when he has the basketball. And so he's got to have the ball in his hands in order to be who he is.
Right.
And so how you surround him, I think, is the bigger question. You're going to have to go somewhere that's willing to cater to what he wants and how he wants to play. And the more that I think about it, I don't know if Miami makes sense in that regard because of Eric Spoelstra being Eric Spoelstra and having more or less a system and I feel like Spoelstra is one that doesn't really cater it to what he is given. I think he has things in place that he wants done.
I do think that Spoelstra is – I think Spoelstra, Carlisle's really good.
Yes.
I think Carlisle might be the best coach in the game at making adjustments and amendments based on his personnel. And I think Spoelstra might be the best coach in the game at getting his personnel to adjust to his style.
That's fair.
Does that make sense?
That's fair. Yeah. Spoelstra to me is Mike Tomlin, and the Miami Heat are the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Yeah, but I think they have more success than that.
Well, without LeBron James, and the success with Spoelstra hasn't been at least as...
I mean, they went to the finals, though. Like, he took a group with Tyler Hero and Bam, and granted, they had...
Are you talking about the bubble?
No, that wasn't in the bubble.
They went up against the Lakers in the bubble in the NBA Finals.
I know, but they also... I'm pretty certain, I could be wrong here. Didn't they, with Jimmy Butler Bam Adebayo. They had a really surprise run to the finals like 2 years after that. Am I wrong?
Yes, they lost to Denver.
And they beat Boston in the Eastern Conference Finals.
Yes, they lost to Denver. Yeah. Was that the series where Boston was up 3-1 and lost? Was that to Miami? Or am I making something else up?
I think that's right. I know this. The bubble, you're correct. This goes back to where I was the good luck charm, and it turned out to be in my Walter Mitty-esque lifestyle. And I'll do it in 60 seconds or less here to not bore people with it. But as an Indianapolis enthusiast and as an English major and as a Kurt Vonnegut, a noted Kurt Vonnegut zealot, I had a great respect and intrigue over the author Dan Wakefield, who was 10 years behind Vonnegut at Shortridge and then became a colleague and a confidant of Kurt Vonnegut's. And Dan Wakefield wrote a book called Going All the Way, which was a bestseller in 1970 or 71, and became an extremely accomplished author in a number of different areas. And Dan Wakefield moved back to Indianapolis 6, 7, 8 years ago, something like that. And I saw him on television with my friend Emily Longnecker, was interviewing him about the Emmett Till trial that he had covered as a young journalist. And I thought, oh my gosh, Dan Wakefield has moved back to Indianapolis, the Indianapolis native and legendary author. So I asked Emily if she could make a meeting between the two of us. And when I met Dan Wakefield, he said, well, I know that you work in sports, and I'm a diehard fan of the Miami Heat. Would you like to come over to my house and watch a Heat game? And so I went over to his house to watch the Heat, and they won. So he invited me back a second time, and they won again. He invited me back a third time, and they won again. And I ended up watching 18 games at his home with the Miami Heat, and they won all 18 of them. So we were like forever best friends. And it was an incredible, fortuitous friendship that I will cherish forever. But thank you to the Miami Heat for that. Even though I wasn't a Miami Heat fan, I acted like I was when I watched the games with Dan.
So in that 22-23 season when Miami made the NBA Finals, they were up 3-0 on Boston, and then the Celtics forced a Game 7.
Okay.
And lost at the Garden to Miami.
Okay.
And then they went on to lose 4-1 to Denver.
I watched a ton of those. I think the bubble games that was the season where they won 18 straight, and we watched all of them. And then I watched a ton of those games also into the finals along with him. When we come back, what an interweaving web, I guess better way of saying it, that sports can become. And sometimes it creates interesting perspectives, including one of them for a former Mr. Basketball that we'll get into next. Hey there, Jake Query for Chicago's Pizza. Plenty of time. That's the best thing, by the way, about the new time period here that we're on is I've got all kinds of time to tell you about the lunch buffet at Chicago's Pizza, which is the best. Chicago's Pizza with 19 Central Indiana locations, and they are there every day at the beginning of the day making the fresh hand-rolled breadsticks, the fresh dough, and all of the pizzas that come with the lunch buffet. And then, of course, the salad bar. All the fixings fresh right there before your very eyes, the salad bar. You get all that, the breadsticks, traditional pizza, deep dish pizza options, dessert pizza, the salad bar, and a soft drink for a price that is better than what you're going to pay across the street. And you're going to say, that was so good, I want more. No problem. Then you can always do the family meal deal at dinner time. 2 medium, 1 topping pizzas and the breadsticks for just $25. Chicago's Pizza is the very best. 19 of them in Central Indiana, 26 across the state. Find a location near you at chicagospizza.com.
Query and Company on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
We'll check in with JMV in just a little bit here as part of the crossover brought to you by the good guys at Love Heating and Air. Love-HVAC.com is the website, 317-353-2141. Eddie playing all bird songs today because we figured out that Cape Verde has more birds than people, including storks, which deliver people, but Eddie and Scott were unaware.
Yeah, nope, still don't.
You've never heard that?
Nope.
I
don't live in a fictitious world, Jake, like you.
I remember an IndyCar race like 5 years ago at Iowa was sponsored by a company called Avoid the Stork. And it was like some sort of it was controversial, but it was like a birth control planning company or something. But it was called Beyond or Avoid the Stork is what it was called.
Now, what's the difference between controversial and controversial?
Intellect of pronouncer.
Enunciator,
yeah. Controversial and controversial. It's probably controversial. Controversial is probably the correct pronunciation, right?
Yeah, I have no idea.
Yesterday, I got to thinking about this as I was listening to a guy talk. And that is how sports can interweave, and sometimes we look into the mirror to see things, and sometimes we look across the way and we learn from our rival. And let me explain. Braden Smith is going around to different NBA teams right now and showing what he can do and working out and doing interviews and all of the things that go into eventually being drafted into the NBA. And there are going to be a lot of doubters about Braden Smith. He's the all-time assist leader in college basketball history. He had a remarkable career at Purdue. He played in a national championship game. He got to Elite Eights. Remarkable career. Great player. Legendary career in college. But at the NBA standpoint, he's going to again here. Too small, too short, too slow, all of those things. And he grew up a Pacer fan. Now, I remember when I was in college, I mentioned it earlier, I was very good friends with Ryan Carr, who is now the general manager of Indiana University basketball. He was a student manager at the time. He now oversees the roster building and works hand in hand with Darren DeVries in building up Indiana basketball and assembling Indiana basketball. And Ryan and I spent a ton of time in college just watching games and talking about basketball, eating pizzas on a Saturday night when everybody else was out. We did a lot of that. And it was beyond my wildest dreams, and probably Ryan's certainly, that the situation would then present itself where he would go and rise to a front office position with the Pacers in scouting for the NBA, and then in addition to that, having the job now that he has in Bloomington. But in his position with the Pacers, Ryan Carr spent a lot of time going around to different college basketball programs, watching players, including the amount of time that he spent in West Lafayette. And Ryan Carr, who was IU basketball through and through, came from Seattle to move to Bloomington, to go to school at Indiana, to learn under Bob Knight. So therefore, it would seem odd that a guy like that would have a really good working relationship with Matt Painter in Purdue. Except for that Matt Painter in Purdue, Matt Painter grew up an Indiana fan. And Matt Painter, who, as I mentioned earlier, was on an AAU basketball trip with Todd Leary when they were seniors in high school, when the news came that Jay Edwards was leaving Indiana and a scholarship opened up at the last minute. And Leary was on his way to Minnesota, and Painter was going to go play at Purdue. And the two of them said to each other, well, one of the two of us is probably going to get this scholarship. And at least we know where we're going to go if we don't end up with it at Indiana. And in fact, it was Leary that got the phone call, so Painter ended up at Purdue. And we know now his came back, coached at Purdue, et cetera. The point I'm trying to make is when Matt Painter was building the Purdue program, he obviously had Coach Gene Cady as the blueprint. But there also was, maybe not schematically, but for Matt Painter, just in terms of observation, I'm sure some of the ways that he built that program, he looked at Indiana because that's who he grew up watching. But then as a player and as a coach, the arch rival. But you can learn from seeing things from your arch rival. And that's not to say that Purdue needed Indiana to learn from. Purdue has exceeded Indiana, and he's done a remarkable job. But there was, whether you know it or not, there was definitely like this confluence of the rivals. And for Ryan Carr, now in building Indiana, I think he will look towards some of the things that he learned in observing Matt Painter and Purdue, because he has a great respect for him. And in the case of Braden Smith, here is a guy that grew up a Pacer fan, undoubtedly watched the Pacers run of a year ago to the finals where they went through and dispatched New York, and unquestionably was cheering against the New York Knicks. And yet, here we are a year later where that rival, the team that Braden Smith, one would assume because he, by his own admission, grew up a Pacer fan, he rivals the New York Knicks and doesn't like the New York Knicks. Yet, the Knicks just winning the NBA title means that the example and the blueprint is there in the form of the team that he grew up watching from the other side and maybe can take something from that in the form of Jalen Brunson. Because Brunson is a guy that grew up in Illinois, won a state title, played on a U.S. national team, and I think it was a 19 and under, won a title, went to Villanova, won multiple national championships at Villanova. And in all of that, he still was told he was too small, too short, couldn't do this, couldn't do that. He's setting a blueprint for Braden Smith. Braden Smith yesterday worked out for the Pacers and was asked about not just his Pacers fandom and that run, but also, is there inspiration in what Jalen Brunson just did?
I don't think it made me think differently, but it definitely gave people our size. I know he's a little bit taller than me. I'm probably a little shorter than that, but but people of that size like hope and a chance that it is possible, it is doable, and obviously I have enough confidence in myself in my game and my ability to go out and perform and play and be special like that. Obviously don't know when and where, but at the end of the day, like it gives a lot of people hope, and especially that run they had like with TJ and Nembhard, like it was good to see that. It gave people let's see smaller guards like more of an opportunity and hope with that.
Now, the funny thing is, Andrew Nembhard's brother is in the NBA, and he's, I think, sub 6 foot. McConnell's what, 6'2", 6'3"?
Let me look.
I think McConnell's listed at 6'2" or 6'3".
6'1".
Is that what he's listed at?
Yes.
Okay. But again, I mean, Braden Smith, through the process here, checking in basically at just under, and this is hard to believe, just under 5'11". But he does play bigger than that. And this is going to come down to this. I did think there was a time where I thought Braden Smith was potentially a first rounder. He's not going to go in the first round because of the size. But I do think, and we all do this in fantasy football, fantasy sports are, I think, beneficial because it gives all of us the ability to like act and think as if we're like a general manager and have fun with making a trade or draft and stash and all that. And if you do fantasy football, you always have that one guy.
Size has always been an issue.
Okay. When it comes to Eddie trying to find fitted hats, for example.
Size has always been an issue.
That is correct. But when it comes to fantasy football drafts, you always have that one player that you know everybody in the room is thinking like they're going to outsmart everybody and grab that guy, but they don't want to do it until like round 5. I remember the first year that I played fantasy football, in the 6th round, I think it was, I selected Randy Moss. He was a rookie with the Vikings. I mean, like almost won me my league. But everybody in the room was like, oh, man, I was thinking about taking that guy. I just didn't want to do it yet. Now, there are other years where I did that, and Cecil Collins comes to mind, and then it completely blows up on you. So you do it by navigating through and weighing out, if I take this guy now, what am I bypassing on? If I'm taking this guy now and there is huge boom that can come with it, how big a bust is it going to be if it doesn't work out? So for Braden Smith, I think he probably falls out of round number 1 because of the fact that it is a loaded draft. And if people feel like he is a quote-unquote flyer, they're going to want to wait until they get to the point in the draft where if it's bust, they're not going to then look at who they could have had. Jarris Walker, to me, people talk all the time. Well, this guy was a bust. Why did they draft him? Why did they take him? And Jarris Walker, I don't think anybody thinks he's a bust, but they say, you hear the narrative, well, he was a top 10 pick, and the Pacers haven't gotten a return on investment on that. But who did they pass on? If you look at the year that Jarris Walker was selected, do you happen to have that year in the draft, Eddie? My years all run together. Was it 24 that he was selected?
I'll pull it up.
23. It might have been 23.
It was 23, yes.
Okay. And he was, and I always forget between he and Matherin. One was, I think, 6th, and one was 8th, if I'm not mistaken.
You are. Matherin was, yes. Yes.
Matherin's another one. Matherin was a pretty decent pick because he obviously, was a good player. But look at Jarris Walker and tell me the 4 picks directly after him.
Taylor Hendricks, Cason Wallace, Jet Howard, and Derek Lively.
I mean, are any of those like real game changers? That could be. I mean, Lively would be a nice piece for them, probably.
Wallace would be a good piece too because he's a solid perimeter defender and 3-point shooter. Then you get into Dick, Hawkins, Buffkin, George, Hood Shafino,
Grady Dick's starting to come along a little bit. Yes.
Yeah.
But you get my point, right? It's not like any of those are a holy cow. How did they miss?
Brendan Pajimski.
That's the fellow with the curly hair, right?
Yeah, that plays for Golden State.
Yeah.
Yes.
We had one of the Colts players we had on, went to high school with him, remember? I don't remember which one.
Yeah.
But they grew up together. But either way, I do think Smith will get drafted. I don't know whether it will be to the Pacers, but it all comes down to weighing out whether or not you feel that you then are at a point where there's no other investment that you have to have, number one. And number two, I do think that eventually we're going to figure it out. Eventually we're going to get smart and say, you know what? We can only bypass on a Jalen Brunson type so many times before we say, you know what? Maybe size is not, in fact, the issue. And there's something to be said for guys that just know how to play and just know how to win. We'll find out what J&B's got cooking. We'll see if we can catch up with them as we do our cool down of the show and hand it off to him to find out what he's got going on for 3 o'clock. Brought to you by the good guys at Love Heating and Air, love-hvac.com.
This is Query and Company on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
Eddie, do you have big plans for this afternoon?
Yes, I do. I do indeed, Jake.
That would be what?
Another tour, wedding venue, and then Fever tonight. Yeah.
Where's this tour?
JMV can actually walk to it if you really wanted to.
Really?
Yeah.
Your parents' house?
I was going to say JMV's backyard.
JMV joining us now. John, let's get to the first and most important question of the day as part of the cool down of our program here and previewing what you've got coming up at 3 o'clock. Do you miss us at about 2:55 every day?
Did you listen yesterday when it was half-assed and so clunky to get into it? Of course I do. Yes. Did you hear it? It was a stinking disaster. We had 19 PSAs play, and then we clunked into in the Sports Center top of the hour. So, hell yeah, something was amiss, and you weren't there, and Eddie wasn't there. We had FUBAR. It was problematic. I barely adjusted.
I was at the pool. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah, I just told James. I said, James, man, let's let me go on at 2:56 next time, okay? I'm not going till 3:00 anymore. We'll start at 2:56. But no, I absolutely miss you. It's kind of funny, man. It's like the rev up thing, right? It like gets me revved up. There are a lot of things I do with Hammer and Nigel that gets me revved up too. But you kind of get me kick-started.
That's right.
For the show, and without that there. It is not the same, but I like where you are. I like the dynamic that you are in that time slot, and I think it's pretty sweet. But I do.
What is, by the way, on the big program today coming up at 3:00?
I don't have the foggiest idea, honestly. So I don't know. We'll see what happens. I'll just make it up as we go along. So about 2:56, I think everybody's going to find out, Jake. But
this sounds like 9:56 this morning on my calendar.
No, man. It is good. I got to listen to you guys today, and you guys doing a good crosstalk, and yeah, that was a slot that needed to be filled by a level of local greatness, and you provide that. So yeah, it's good. But yeah, we closed up yesterday. It was like firing up an old vehicle you hadn't started in a while. It was weird. So,
by the way, John, are you familiar with I don't know how you would word it, the association between the delivery of babies and a stork? Are you familiar with that? Does that ring a bell at all?
Well, yeah. You mean like the whole myth of the stork?
Well,
like
I mean,
in a
just
cartoon?
like the association. Like it seems like when people have a baby, you would see like the sign out in their front yard of a stork, right? Like delivering a baby.
Yeah, well, yeah, Jake, man, remember the cartoon where the stork was drunk in the Looney Tunes and he
Yes.
always takes the wrong baby, the wrong spot?
Yeah, he does. I think he took Bugs Bunny somewhere erroneously. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, here, you take this baby. Yeah. I mean, it was great. Hell yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Eddie was unfamiliar with it. That's why I asked. But maybe we're just old, John. Maybe we're just old.
Eddie is going to. Is he going to the Sycamore over here? Is that where Eddie is going to take a tour, or is he going to my backyard or the Paradise Day Watson backyard? I didn't know where he was going today.
Sycamore would be the correct guess there, John.
I like the Sycamore a great deal. Right next to Mallow Run, and shout out to our good friend Bill Richardson over there, Eddie. He's a good dude.
All right. Well, that's apparently a stop on the tour, John. So, matter of fact, if John can walk over, maybe the two of you can see each other here as Eddie goes and tours it before the show. But John will be on at 3:00 today, and I would imagine you'd mentioned a little World Cup conversation in there as well as we continue to educate ourselves on soccer, right?
Yesterday was an awesome day of draws. Awesome day of ties.
It was that. It was that.
Actually, I'm enjoying it, but I make fun of the ties because I think those are stupid. But whatever.
But you know what, though? Yeah. Then when it comes down to it always drives me nuts, though, when it just comes down at the end of penalty, like a shootout of penalty kicks. And I'm like, that's like having a free throw contest at the end of Game 7. Like, no thanks, right? Like, just keep playing.
See, I don't know. I want a little bit. I think that the penalty kick needs to be a little more difficult. I mean, who the hell can't make that? You and I can waltz out there and hit a goal on a penalty kick.
Basically, what happens is they get a goaltender out there, and they're like, okay, we're going to flip a coin. You go left or right. And he goes to the left, and you kick to the right. And you're like, all right, cool, next. I mean, well, I'm sure we're angering soccer fans by our nuanced level of discussion.
Well, hey, I think soccer needs a little influence from our ways. We need more scoring, a little. I think it's the running up and down the field stuff's exciting, but I think we need a little bit more scoring. And if you wanted to fix the penalty kicks, move that thing back a little bit. Don't make it so stinking easy.
That's fair. No, that's definitely fair. All right, John will be with you coming up at 3:00 today. We'll be listening, John. Appreciate it.
Thank you, buddy.
All right, J&V joining us here. Again, brought to you by the good guys at Love Heating and Air. So, Eddie, this is stop number what for you in terms of the venue tour, if you will?
Number 2.
Out of how many?
We've got 3 or 4 more lined up.
I want you to do me a favor. I'm going to do a public service for you here.
Okay.
Now, admittedly, I have not been through this process.
Okay.
I have been in, I believe, 14 weddings. I have been best man, I believe, 8 times.
Okay.
So I have some experience. I need you to do me a favor. Look straight ahead towards me, okay? Now I want you to look at the ceiling. Now I want you to look at the floor. Now, just without moving your head side to side. Look at the ceiling.
Well, if I look at the floor, I'm going to smack the microphone.
Well, okay, then sit back just a little bit. Okay, now look at the ceiling. Now
okay.
Look at the floor. Do it one more time. Ceiling, floor. That's a nod. Okay?
Yes.
That's what you do.
I know, Jake.
With all of this.
Yeah. We were at a tour on Sunday, and, the lady that was giving us the walkthrough, she was asking Olivia a question, and they were like, well, what do you think? I said, well, if that's what she wants, that's what works.
Yeah, there you go.
That's fine with me.
There you go.
There was a round of applause from everyone there.
Yeah, that's it. And the same is going to be true for
the rest of my life. Yes.
Yes. The color of the ink on the invitations.
The
right?
napkin color. Yes.
The napkin color. Yep.
Yeah. Although we are having a little bit of a debate about this because there are some people that want to do some other things around the reception because I think there's some cool things we could do, but she's got what she wants in her mind set.
One of the best bachelor parties that I did, I mean, I was much younger. I was early 20s. One of my first buddies to get married got married in Louisville. Mm-hmm. And for the the wedding gift that we got, he got each of us a custom bat with our signature on it.
That's pretty cool.
Pretty cool. The Louisville Slugger Museum is very, very cool if you've never been to it, by the way.
I have indeed.
Although my understanding is because my buddy Byron was just at a baseball tournament in Louisville, and they stayed on the Indiana side of the river in a small town in a hotel, and he said it was quite the eye-opening cultural experience. So you got to be selective on where it is that you're staying.
Oh, that's true.
What do we have on the big program for tomorrow?
Tomorrow we'll recap the Fever game tonight against the Toronto Tempo in terms of what's coming up after us, Jake. Of course, we got the Rich Eisen show from 1 to 3, John, and he'll take you to about 6:15. You got the Colts Daily Update tonight, and then Fever and Tempo with John Nolan Briagos and Mick Tidrow starting at 6:30.
Does Toronto play a fast pace?
Yeah, I don't know. That's a great question because they are the Tempo.
I mean, you would think, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's either that or they're named after a smaller version of the Taurus, and I don't think those are made anymore. But nonetheless, we will talk about it tomorrow. Fever Toronto tonight. We'll recap it tomorrow. We'll continue the conversation, World Cup stuff as well, and find birds of other countries. We'll do all of it tomorrow beginning at 10 a.m., and I thank you for listening to Query & Company.